Settle yourself comfortably and let your breath slow as we embark. This journey we're undertaking is one not of adventure or dramatic shifts, but rather one of repetition, of patience and endurance. We're entering into the countryside, the rural area of rural America itself in the 19th century. This, by its nature, is a world governed not by clocks, but by the cycle of light, weather, and ultimately the turning of the seasons. There are literally no great speeches here, nor are there likely to be moments recalled or recorded later. Rather, there are long days, familiar rhythms, and an absolute relationship, as it were, with the land. As we embark, there is nothing really that you need to commit to memory. Rather, there is nothing but your imagination placed firmly within this life, as we begin by considering what it actually, historically, meant to be a 19th century American farmer. You rise with the sun because light is the only reliable signal that the day has begun, and darkness will soon take away your chance to work. In the 19th century, most American farmers did not own clocks, and even those who did rarely consulted them. Time is measured instead by the color of the sky, the angle of shadows, and the sounds of animals stirring. Roosters, cattle, and birds become the markers of morning rather than numbers on a dial. Sleeping late is not a temptation because the work waiting outside grows heavier with every wasted moment of daylight. Your body slowly learns this rhythm, waking almost automatically before the sun fully appears. There is a sense of quiet inevitability to it, as though the land itself is calling you awake. Over years, this pattern becomes so natural that rest feels wrong when the sky is already bright. The seasons guide your life more strongly than personal plans or ambitions ever could. Spring arrives not as a pleasant change, but as a demanding signal that planting must begin immediately. The soil must be prepared at exactly the right moment. Neither to wet nor to dry, summer brings long days filled with relentless labor. When daylight stretches on and rest feels distant, autumn offers no relief. Only a different kind of urgency as harvest determines whether the coming winter will be survivable. Winter, though slower, carries its own burdens of cold, scarcity, and maintenance. Each season replaces the last without pause, and none can be ignored. Your sense of time becomes circular rather than linear, repeating the same expectations year after year. Morning begins quietly, often in near silence. The house is still and the air inside feels heavy with the night's cold. You dress quickly, layering clothing that has been worn thin through years of use. There is little concern for comfort, only for warmth and durability. Shoes are stiff, hats are practical, and every garment carries signs of repair. As you step outside, the ground may be damp with dew or frozen hard beneath your feet. These sensations are familiar and require no comment. They are simply part of beginning another day. Before tending to yourself, you tend to the animals. Livestock depends on you completely, and their needs cannot be postponed. Cows must be milked at roughly the same time each day, regardless of weather or fatigue. Chickens expect feed, pigs stir noisily, and horses wait to be harnessed. These routines anchor the morning and leave little room for variation. Over time, your movements become automatic, shaped by repetition rather than thought. You know where each tool hangs and which gate sticks when opened. This familiarity brings efficiency, but not ease. The labor still weighs on your body, even if your mind drifts elsewhere. Breakfast comes only after essential tasks are done. The meal is modest and rarely changes. Cornbread, porridge, or cold leftovers are common, accompanied by water or weak coffee if available. Food serves a purpose rather than offering pleasure. You eat quickly, knowing that the day's work will soon demand your full attention again. There's no sense of lingering at the table. Time feels too valuable even when it is plentiful. This approach to meals reinforces the idea that survival depends on steady effort rather than comfort. As the sun climbs higher, the real labor of the day unfolds. Fields require constant attention, whether through planting, weeding, or repairing damage caused by weather or animals. Each task feels endless, stretching across hours without clear milestones. You measure progress by how much remains undone. rather than how much has been completed. Physical fatigue builds slowly, settling into muscles and joints. Pain becomes a constant companion, rarely sharp but always present. There is no expectation of relief, only endurance. This steady exertion defines the farmer's relationship with daylight, whether it remains a constant. Concern throughout the day, clouds forming in the distance are watched carefully, not admired. A sudden storm can undo weeks of labor in a matter of hours. Heat drains strength quickly, while cold stiffens fingers and slows movement. Wind carries dust, pollen, or bitter air depending on the season. You adapt your pace and expectations to these conditions without complaint. Complaining would change nothing. Instead, you learn to work around the weather rather than against it. This adaptation becomes second nature over time. Midday offers little rest, even when the sun stands directly overhead. Shade is welcome but rarely indulgent. You may pause briefly to drink water or wipe sweat from your face, but stopping for too long feels irresponsible. The land does not wait, and neither does the season. Hunger returns quietly, reminding you of the morning's modest meal. Lunch, if it happens at all, is simple and eaten quickly. There's no formal break, only a slight slowing of pace. The day continues without acknowledgement of the body's growing fatigue. Isolation becomes more noticeable as hours pass. Sounds are limited to wind, insects, and the occasional call of an animal. Human voices are rare, sometimes absent for days. This quiet creates space for thought, but also for worry. You think about weather, supplies, and the uncertain future. There is time to reflect, but little opportunity to change circumstances. The isolation is not dramatic, but it is constant. Over years, it shapes a mindset of self-reliance and quiet endurance. Loneliness becomes familiar rather than alarming. As afternoon turns toward evening, light begins to soften. Shadows grow longer, signaling that time is narrowing again. You feel a renewed urgency to complete tasks that cannot wait until morning. Tools feel heavier now and movements slow slightly. Still, you continue, driven by habit rather than motivation. The end of daylight marks the end of productivity. Darkness brings rest, but also limitation. This daily countdown reinforces the power of the sun over your life. Evening tasks mirror those of the morning, bringing the day full circle. Animals must be fed again, secured, and checked for signs of illness or injury. Gates are closed, tools put away, and fires tended. These actions prepare not just for the night, but for the next morning as well. There's comfort in this repetition even when exhaustion runs deep. Predictability offers stability in an otherwise uncertain life. Each completed routine feels like a small assurance of continuity. Nothing is finished forever, only paused. Supper is quiet and unremarkable. Food is filling but plain, designed to sustain rather than delight. Conversation, if present, centers on practical matters. There's little energy for storytelling or reflection. The body demands rest and the mind follows. Darkness outside deepens quickly, limiting activity indoors as well. Candles or oil lamps provide weak light, encouraging early sleep. Night arrives not as a choice, but as a necessity. Sleeping after dark becomes as natural as waking with the sun. Beds are simple and comfort is secondary to warmth. You fall asleep quickly, not from boredom, but from physical exhaustion. Dreams, if they come, are shaped by routine and labor. Tomorrow already feels close even before sleep fully takes hold. The cycle continues without pause or promise of change. Seasons turn, years pass, and the rhythm remains. This is how life unfolds, guided entirely by the sun and shaped by the land. Endless labor defines the life of a 19th century American farmer, as every day requires careful attention to the land and the animals that sustain the household. Plowing is often the first major task, turning soil that is heavy, uneven, and resistant to the plowshare. The work requires steady strength as horses or oxen pull wooden plows through furrows, while the farmer guides the blade to ensure straight lines and even depth. Each row is methodical, repeated over acres of land, and mistakes mean additional hours of correction. The rhythm of plowing becomes almost meditative, With the soft creak of wood, the smell of turned earth, and the gentle stamping of hooves marking time, sweat gathers. Clothing becomes damp and stiff, and the body adjusts to the slow, repetitive strain. Yet the work must continue, as any delay could shorten the season and reduce the yield. Plowing is not hurried, but deliberate, paced to match the strength of both human and animal. The farmer feels every inch of the furrow, sensing the quality of the soil and the small differences that might affect planting. Even when exhaustion presses in, the knowledge that the land will not wait keeps each motion steady and unbroken. Planting follows the plow with the same combination of physical labor and careful attention. Seeds must be sown at a precise depth and spacing to ensure germination and growth. Corn, wheat, or oats are handled with care, each kernel representing a small investment in survival. The soil, now loosened, welcomes the seed, but weeds and stones must be cleared before sowing. Hands become rough and calloused, and the sun warms the back even as the morning breeze offers fleeting relief. The farmer moves systematically, covering every inch of the field, often with barely a pause. Mistakes are easily visible later in thin rows or failed patches, so concentration remains constant even during repetitive motions. Planting is slow and deliberate, demanding both endurance and patience. With each step, the farmer leaves small imprints, quietly mapping human presence onto the earth. The work is tiring yet satisfying in a quiet, unspoken way, as progress is tangible and measured only by the cultivated rows. After the field is planted, attention turns to fences, which define both property and safety for livestock. Repairs are constant because wood warps, rots, or is knocked down by animals or weather. Posts must be replaced, rails aligned, and nails hammered with care. The sound of hammering echoes across open fields, marking time without urgency. Labor here is intermittent, requiring shifts from bending, lifting, and pounding to walking long distances across the property. Each fence tells a story of prior seasons, repairs, and weathering. The work is repetitive but essential, as a broken fence can lead to lost animals, damaged crops, or long hours of chasing livestock. Despite fatigue, precision is important, for even a small error can create future labor. Repairing fences blends physical exertion with quiet observation, as the farmer notes other potential problems across the property. It is never-ending work, yet it provides a sense of structure to an otherwise unpredictable environment. Feeding animals is another labor-intensive responsibility that must be performed with regularity and care. Cows, chickens, pigs, and horses each have specific diets, and their health depends entirely on proper feeding. Grain must be measured, hay stacked and carried, and water replenished daily. Animals sense routine and become impatient if delayed, adding a subtle pressure to the farmer's movements. There is a quiet rhythm to this work, punctuated by low animal calls, shuffling hooves, and the rustle of feed. Hands grow tired from lifting buckets and spreading hay, yet precision is necessary to ensure that each animal receives the right amount. Feeding is not a moment of leisure, but a functional task performed to maintain life and productivity. Even on days when the field work is lighter, tending to animals requires a constant presence. Each task blends into the next, forming a continuous cycle of labor that stretches from sunrise to sunset. Maintenance of tools and equipment accompanies every major activity, adding another layer to the endless work. Plows must be sharpened, hoes mended, and harnesses inspected for wear. Broken tool can halt a day's progress entirely, so care is taken before, during, and after use. This attention to detail requires quiet concentration, steady hands, and foresight. The smell of oil and metal mixes with dust and soil, creating a constant sensory backdrop. Tasks that might seem minor, like straightening a plowshare or repairing a fence latch, take time and effort but prevent larger problems. Even these small labors contribute to the overall exhaustion of the day. Labor here is less visible than the field work, but equally necessary, forming an invisible thread that holds all other work together. The farmer's awareness never fully rests, shifting seamlessly between large and small duties. Each action repeated daily contributes to the ongoing survival of the household and farm. The rhythm of labor is often dictated by light and heat as much as by necessity. Midday sun can be oppressive, slowing movements and draining energy. Work continues regardless, but the pace adapts to physical limitations. Shade beneath a tree or beside a barn offers temporary respite, yet the mind remains aware of unfinished tasks. In cooler months, frost and shorter days compress working hours, forcing careful allocation of labor. Seasons determine not only what is done, but also when. Requiring long-term planning and immediate action, repetition is unavoidable, as each season mirrors the last, and knowledge gained one year informs every decision the next. The farmer learns to accept limits, to pace effort, and to conserve strength. Each day is structured around these rhythms, blending necessity with endurance. Evening does not bring relief, only a transition to quieter tasks. Animals must be checked again, fences inspected, and tools stored. Fields are left orderly, if unfinished, with plans for the next day already forming in the mind. The body is fatigued and the senses dulled from constant attention to labor. Yet small accomplishments are visible. Rows of planted seeds, repaired sections of fence, fed and watered animals. These markers provide subtle satisfaction even as the sun sets and darkness approaches. The cycle of labor continues silently into night, with tasks paused but not abandoned. Completion is temporary, and tomorrow will demand similar effort. This knowledge shapes the farmer's relationship with work as constant, deliberate, and encompassing. Physical fatigue is ever present and accumulates over days, weeks, and months. The muscles ache from bending, lifting, pulling, and walking long distances. Hands bear the calluses and small cuts of repeated contact with soil, wood, and tools. Feet grow sore from hard ground or uneven terrain. Yet the body adapts, learning endurance and efficiency over time. Pain is steady, never dramatic, and it becomes part of the background of thought. Mental fatigue mirrors physical exhaustion as decisions and observations require constant attention. The farmer's energy is measured and conserved, flowing from task to task without waste. Even the quietest moments of rest are tinged with the awareness of unfinished labor. Through all this work, the land itself is a silent companion, demanding attention and offering minimal feedback. Soil, weather, and crop growth respond slowly to effort, reinforcing patience. The farmer learns to observe subtle changes, the darkening of clouds, the moisture in earth, the emergence of seedlings. Progress is incremental and often invisible to the casual observer. Yet this slow transformation carries meaning and quiet satisfaction. Labor, repetitive and relentless, becomes a way of engaging with the world itself. The relationship between human effort and natural response is intimate but measured. It teaches endurance, observation, and humility in equal measure. Each day spent in toil is a step in a longer, unhurried conversation with the land. Even when work seems endless and monotony dominates, small variations bring subtle attention. A sudden breeze, a flock of birds passing overhead, or the scent of tilled soil creates moments of awareness. These instances are brief, but they punctuate long hours of labor. They offer reminders that the world is alive even if the work remains repetitive. Over time, the mind drifts into patterns, observing these details without urgency. Labor continues steady and measured until the light begins to shift toward evening. There is a quiet satisfaction in completing the tasks that can be completed, paired with the acceptance of what must wait. Life is defined by doing what is necessary with awareness of the rhythms that govern both land and human energy. By sunset, the body and mind are intertwined in shared fatigue. Each task has required focus, strength, and patience. The work done is visible in the fields, fences, and fed animals, forming tangible evidence of effort, yet nothing feels finished forever. For the next day will demand the same attention, repetition, and endurance to find every movement, thought, and action. Rhythm of labor is constant, forming the heartbeat of daily life on a 19th century farm. Even in exhaustion, there is quiet dignity and continuity. Work, though unending, shapes existence into a predictable if relentless flow. This is the world of the farmer, slow, steady and measured by seasons, effort, and the unwavering demands of the land. Food is repetitive and preserved, forming a steady rhythm in the life of a 19th century American farmer. And hunger is something that is understood rather than feared, arriving and departing with the seasons. Morning meals are often simple, consisting of porridge made from cornmeal or oats, accompanied occasionally by fresh milk or a piece of bread left from the previous day. There is little variety and the same dishes appear over and over, yet they provide the sustenance necessary to continue the long hours of labor. Vegetables are seasonal and often preserved through drying, pickling, or storing in cool, dark root cellars. Meat is not abundant, reserved for special occasions, often salted or smoked to extend its usability. Even the simplest meal requires preparation, stirring, chopping, and careful attention to avoid waste. The kitchen itself carries the smell of smoke, cooking grains, and the faint tang of preserved vegetables, forming a sensory backdrop that is constant and familiar. Eating is practical and functional, designed to maintain energy rather than offer pleasure. Yet the act of nourishment carries a quiet reassurance. Hunger, when it comes, is not sudden or alarming, but a steady, expected part of life that teaches patience and restraint. Awareness of food scarcity shapes both the rhythm of the day and the planning of the week, as meals must stretch to meet daily demands. Lunch, when it occurs, is often a hurried affair, eaten between tasks in the fields or near the barn. Bread, cold porridge, or a piece of cured meat may be consumed with water or weak coffee. If it is available, there's rarely a sense of indulgence, and the mind remains partly focused on work and the chores yet to be done. Food serves a purpose first, calming the growl of the stomach and supplying energy for the demanding labor that defines the day. In warmer months, fresh vegetables like beans or squash may appear on the table, harvested early in the morning to supplement the standard fare. In cooler months, preserved foods dominate and the taste may feel repetitive or bland. Yet this simplicity offers a quiet predictability, a rhythm of nourishment aligned with the broader rhythm of life. Meals are not social events in the way they are imagined in later centuries. They are quiet, functional pauses that provide both fuel and structure. The repetition of ingredients and preparation creates a comforting familiarity, even as the body continues to tire. Each bite reminds the farmer of the steady, measured pace of existence, where patience and endurance are as vital as nutrition. Preservation of food is a labor-intensive process that spans the year, ensuring that sustenance lasts through leaner months. Vegetables are pickled, stored in brine or vinegar, and sealed carefully to prevent spoilage. Fruits may be dried, turned into preserves, or kept in cool storage away from light and moisture. Meats are salted, smoked, or dried, requiring careful handling and attention to prevent waste. Dairy products, such as milk or cheese, must be consumed quickly or transformed into more stable forms. This work is often undertaken by women and older children in the household, forming a continuous cycle alongside field labor. The tasks are repetitive, requiring patience and precision, and any failure may mean scarcity later. Hunger is thus managed proactively, anticipated through careful preparation and forethought. The act of preservation connects the family with past labor, reminding them of the cyclical nature of both work and sustenance. Every meal, therefore, carries the invisible presence of previous effort, linking daily consumption with ongoing preparation. Seasonal hunger is quietly acknowledged and forms an inherent part of farm life. In early spring, before new crops have grown, stores from the previous year must stretch to cover weeks of scarcity. This period is understood in advance, and preparation helps manage its discomfort. Late summer and early autumn often bring the opposite, a temporary abundance, but even then, food requires careful rationing to prevent waste before storage becomes critical. Winter, with its short days and frozen ground, brings both monotony and challenge in securing sufficient nutrition. Hunger is not dramatic or violent in the household, but steady and persistent, shaping the daily routine as much as labor does. Its presence encourages moderation and foresight, teaching the young to value what is available rather than lament what is lacking. Each meal, even when simple, carries the reassurance of continuity, the knowledge that effort can stretch sustenance across time. Farmers learn to anticipate these patterns, aligning planting, harvesting, and preservation with the natural ebb and flow of need. Rhythm of food and hunger becomes as predictable as the rhythm of work itself. Meals are also shaped by what is immediately available in the environment. Foraging for herbs, berries, or wild green supplements the main diet, often providing subtle variation in taste and nutrition. Fish may be caught from nearby streams or rivers when present, adding protein to otherwise repetitive fare. Poultry is sometimes raised specifically to provide occasional eggs or meat, again controlled and rationed carefully. These small additions to the diet are rare treats, subtly breaking the monotony of grains and preserved vegetables. Even so, the overall structure of meals remains simple and repetitive. Each plate reflects the necessities of farm life, balancing nutrition with availability and effort. Children learn early to appreciate these small variations while understanding the broader pattern of scarcity and labor. The process of consuming and preparing food is therefore both practical and educational, shaping habits that endure throughout life. In this way, food becomes a quiet teacher of endurance, resourcefulness, and patience. The act of eating itself is slow and methodical, designed to sustain rather than delight. Meals are chewed carefully, swallowed deliberately, and rarely accompanied by conversation beyond the practical. Family members often eat together, yet the atmosphere is quiet, punctuated by the sounds of utensils, bowls, and the occasional comment on the day's labor. Attention is divided between nourishment and the unspoken awareness of remaining tasks. There is a comforting predictability to this routine, a moment of pause in an otherwise active day. Even in the simplicity of porridge or bread, there is the subtle satisfaction of fuel for continued work. The body registers replenishment gradually, matching the slow pace of physical effort in the fields and barn. Eating becomes a ritual of maintenance rather than indulgence, quietly reinforcing the rhythm of life. Hunger, when it appears between meals, is not sudden or alarming, but a gentle reminder of both mortality and continuity. Seasonal preservation influences not just the availability of food, but also the mental experience of the day. Knowing that winter stores are adequate allows a measured focus on labor, without the distraction of constant scarcity. Conversely, the early spring months may weigh on the mind, as limited supplies remind the farmer of the fragility of sustenance. This creates a balance between reassurance and caution, shaping thought and planning throughout the year. Hunger is acknowledged, yet it never dominates, forming a quiet undercurrent rather than a crisis. Every meal, no matter how simple, is a marker of progress in the ongoing struggle against time, weather, and nature itself. Preservation and repetition teach continuity, connecting present effort with future survival. The cycle of planting, harvesting, preserving, and consuming forms an unbroken chain, creating structure and rhythm. The farmer's life is therefore measured not only by labor but also by these slow, deliberate interactions with food. Evening meals are often the simplest of the day, consumed after the majority of work is complete. Dishes resemble those of the morning, often leftovers or basic grains and vegetables. There is little opportunity for culinary creativity. Function outweighs flavor, the body is fatigued, and the mind craves rest more than taste. Yet these meals are essential, replenishing energy spent on endless tasks. The repetition reinforces endurance, training both body and mind to sustain effort across long hours. Awareness of hunger and fullness is intertwined with the awareness of labor completed and tasks awaiting tomorrow. The quiet consumption of repetitive food becomes part of the rhythm of existence, linking physical sustenance to the broader pattern of farm life. In this way, the simplicity of meals contributes to a calm, predictable structure, suitable for both survival and reflection. The relationship with food also shapes social and family life on the farm. Every household member contributes to preparation, preservation, or consumption, forming a shared experience. Children learn to recognize the limitations of supply and the necessity of careful use. Adults maintain the balance between providing adequate nourishment and ensuring enough remains for the following day or season. Tasks like storing root vegetables, churning butter, or preserving meat are collaborative and repetitive, embedding patience and care into daily life. Mealtime is a brief intersection of labor, observation, and sustenance, providing both comfort and instruction. Repetition fosters familiarity and quiet reassurance, reducing anxiety about scarcity. The predictability of meals mirrors the predictability of work, creating a cohesive, cyclical existence. Hunger, moderated by preparation, becomes another rhythm to which all life conforms. In this way, food, like labor, is never idle but forms an integral part of the continuous, measured day. Medical care is rare, slow, and uncertain on a 19th century American farm, shaping daily life and the quiet rhythms of work and family in subtle yet constant ways. Illness is approached with patience, observation, and practical remedies passed down through generations rather than with rapid intervention or modern understanding. There are few trained doctors nearby, and reaching one may require hours or even days of travel over uneven roads and difficult terrain. Illness strikes, the household must rely largely on its own resources, including herbal treatments, poultices, and careful attention to diet and rest. Every minor injury or sudden fever is managed slowly, often with little expectation of complete certainty, teaching both adults and children a form of cautious self-reliance. Even routine ailments are met with careful monitoring. The color of the skin, the warmth of a body, and the persistence of symptoms are all closely noted. Families develop their own knowledge through experience, learning which remedies soothe pain, which treatments encourage recovery, and which efforts are ultimately futile. This slow approach requires patience, observation, and endurance, qualities that become intertwined with the daily labor and responsibilities of farm life. While modern medicine is distant, these traditional methods create a rhythm of care and vigilance that structures the households. Attention and energy. Life proceeds under the constant awareness that health is both fragile and gradual, requiring gentle attention rather than urgent intervention during serious illness. The household must adjust routines to accommodate the patient's needs. Tasks that would normally be shared across family members are redistributed, often increasing labor for those who remain healthy. Feeding, tending animals, and maintaining crops continue, but at a measured pace designed to balance survival with attention to the sick. Isolation of the patient is sometimes necessary, not for fear, but to prevent the spread of ailments that cannot be treated quickly. Observation becomes a careful, almost ritualized part of the day, with family members checking temperature, pulse, appetite, and energy at intervals that are quiet and methodical. This constant awareness shapes the pace of life, slowing work slightly while preserving continuity. Even minor health concerns are treated with caution, reinforcing the slow, patient approach that defines the household. Over time, these small practices become ingrained habits, forming a subtle backbone to daily existence. The rhythm of health and labor blends, each affecting the other in a quiet, ongoing negotiation. Life on the farm is therefore measured not only in labor but also in the careful attention to fragile human bodies. Preventive care is an important, ongoing part of farm life, even when treatment options are limited. Families understand the importance of hygiene, fresh air, and nutrition, adjusting routines to maintain health as best they can. Wells must be kept clean, animals fed and stabled properly, and living spaces aired regularly to prevent disease. Clothing is repaired and layered to preserve warmth, particularly in the winter months when cold illnesses are common. Food preservation techniques, already integral to daily existence, also serve to prevent sickness by reducing spoilage and contamination. Even the layout of the household reflects awareness of potential hazards, with spaces for work, rest, and cooking carefully considered. These preventive measures do not eliminate illness, but they create a structured, predictable environment in which disease is managed gradually rather than with immediate certainty. Patience, observation, and foresight dominate daily practice, Through these habits, families slowly learn how to live with uncertainty, aligning labor, rest, and care into a cohesive daily routine. Health management becomes a quiet, pervasive part of existence. Traveling for medical care is a slow and often arduous process when a trained doctor is required. Reaching one may involve long walks or wagon rides over rough, sometimes muddy roads. The journey itself consumes energy that might otherwise be used for farm labor or household tasks. Often, the decision to travel is balanced against the perceived severity of the illness and the capacity of the household to manage without assistance. Supplies and simple remedies must be carried along, adding further preparation to the effort. Weather, terrain, and distance make such journeys unpredictable and exhausting, reinforcing the understanding that immediate care is rare. Even once a doctor is reached, treatment is cautious and limited, reflecting the slow pace of 19th century medicine. Families return home aware that recovery will be gradual and must be supported by careful attention and continued labor. This slow, deliberate engagement with health shapes the rhythm of the day as much as the cycles of work in the fields or tending animals. Illness is managed, not conquered, and life continues within its limitations. Daily awareness of minor injuries forms another element of the farm's cautious approach to health. Cuts, bruises, or burns are treated immediately with simple remedies, yet the outcomes remain uncertain. Bandaging, washing, or applying herbal salves is done methodically with attention to cleanliness and protection from further harm. These tasks are repetitive, almost ritualized, and often performed by family members who have learned through experience. The body's slow recovery is accepted, and work is adjusted gently to accommodate limitations. Over time, the farmer develops a deep understanding of the subtle signals of the body, learning to recognize early signs of infection, fatigue, or strain. Observation becomes both practical and meditative, reinforcing awareness of daily life. The quiet management of injury blends with the broader rhythms of work and food, creating continuity and structure. Even small setbacks are incorporated into the pace of life without dramatic disruption. This steady vigilance fosters endurance and measured responses rather than panic or haste. Knowledge of traditional remedies passes slowly from one generation to the next, forming an intangible layer of health care that accompanies labor and daily living. Herbal treatments for fevers, digestive issues, or minor aches are applied with careful precision. Teas, poultices, and compresses are prepared from ingredients grown on the farm or collected nearby. Families keep a mental catalog of effective practices, observing results over weeks or months rather than expecting immediate relief. These practices become part of the fabric of life, quietly integrated into daily routines. Observation, patience, and repetition dominate this approach, reinforcing calm awareness rather than urgency. Children absorb these lessons as they grow, learning to respond to discomfort gradually and practically. Knowledge of the body, illness, and remedy becomes intertwined with the rhythm of work and the pace of seasons, even as the farmer labors endlessly in fields or barns. Attention to health moves alongside each step, forming a quiet but essential aspect of life. Illness is managed slowly, and survival depends on both effort and careful observation. The uncertainty of medical care shapes the psychology of the household in subtle ways. Awareness of potential illness fosters careful pacing of labor, attention to nourishment, and mindful observation of all members. There is a quiet acceptance of fragility, a recognition that effort alone does not guarantee continued health. This understanding blends with daily labor, food preparation, and maintenance of property, creating a holistic sense of responsibility. Anxiety is mitigated by routine, and anticipation of seasonal patterns provides a framework for managing both work and well-being. Each day's completion, with animals fed, fields tended, and meals prepared, reinforces the household's resilience. Medical uncertainty is therefore not a source of panic but a factor shaping measured action and thoughtful care. Life continues with a slow, deliberate rhythm where attention to health and labor moves in tandem. Even minor ailments are woven into the pattern of days, contributing to the larger sense of endurance and continuity. Evening routines include subtle attention to health as the body is monitored before sleep. Fatigue, minor aches, and dietary effects are noted quietly. Remedies or adjustments to work are made to accommodate ongoing needs. The mind remains aware of potential concerns, that the body rests in anticipation of tomorrow's labor. This gentle vigilance is part of the farm's rhythm, integrating patience, observation, and endurance into daily life. The household moves together through these routines, each member performing small tasks that preserve both health and structure. This quiet management of the body parallels the ongoing attention given to crops, animals, and tools. Both work and care proceed slowly, measured by effort, observation, and repetition. In this way, life on the farm continues steadily even when medical certainty is unavailable, and the day ends with both accomplishment and gentle preparedness. Isolation dominates days pass, without seeing another person, shaping the quiet, measured rhythm of life on a 19th century American farm in ways that are subtle but profound. The farmhouse may be the only structure for miles, surrounded by fields, forests, or pastures that stretch toward the horizon. Human contact is limited to family members, whose routines mirror each other in silent cooperation rather than conversation or entertainment. You rise, labor, eat, and rest largely in the company of animals, tools, and the land itself. Birds call from distant trees, insects hum in the warm air, and the wind carries the faint scent of soil and grass, but the sound of human voices is rare. Even when neighbors or traveling salesmen appear, visits are brief, focused, and functional rather than social. The mind learns to fill the quiet with observation, thought, and reflection, while the body continues the steady, repetitive labor of plowing, planting, feeding, and repairing. Isolation is not dramatic or lonely in the sense of sudden emotion. It is a continuous backdrop, a constant companion shaping perception and awareness. The lack of frequent human interaction fosters self-reliance, teaching patience and endurance, and creating a rhythm that aligns closely with the cycles of work and seasons. The absence of casual contact allows time for close observation of small details. In both the environment and the household, every change in weather, soil, or animal behavior becomes significant. Even minor variations are noted and remembered. The sound of a hoof on the hard earth or the rustle of leaves becomes meaningful, offering both warning and comfort. Attention to these subtleties develops slowly, becoming an almost meditative aspect of daily life. Mental energy is directed outward toward the land and inward toward planning rather than being consumed by idle chatter. Even chores gain additional significance as they occupy both body and mind in the absence of external distraction. Each completed task brings quiet satisfaction and a sense of structure to a day that might otherwise feel unbounded. Over time, isolation fosters a deeper connection to the immediate world, the cycles of labor, and the patterns of the natural environment. It teaches endurance not only of physical work but also of extended silence and self-directed thought. Isolation also heightens the awareness of personal routine and its importance to survival. The repetition of labor, the careful preparation of meals, and the tending of animals take on a new significance when there are few other humans to witness or assist. Each task is not performed for recognition but for necessity, reinforcing the quiet, practical nature of existence. The farmer develops a meticulous sense of responsibility, understanding that failure to act will have immediate consequences. Water must be carried, fences repaired, seeds planted, and livestock fed without expectation of aid. These tasks create a rhythm that occupies the entire day, leaving little mental space for worry beyond the immediate. Even leisure or small breaks are quiet and contemplative, often spent observing the sky, listening to wind through trees, or feeling the texture of soil between fingers. Solitude encourages mindfulness, turning ordinary labor into a series of thoughtful, deliberate actions. Days pass almost imperceptibly, shaped by work, weather, and the quiet presence of the surrounding landscape. The psychological effects of isolation are subtle but influential. Time feels elongated, with hours measured less by clocks and more by light, labor, and routine. Days can merge into one another, each resembling the last in pattern and pace. This creates a sense of continuity and stability, even in the face of unpredictable weather or crop challenges. Loneliness is experienced not as acute emotion, but as a slow, persistent awareness of the absence of casual human presence. The mind adjusts, developing internal narratives, reflections, or practical problem-solving habits that occupy thought in the absence of conversation. Even children learn early to entertain themselves, to observe, and to absorb the lessons of labor and environment without constant guidance. The quiet fosters imagination and mental discipline, allowing for planning, memory, and anticipation to intertwine with physical labor over years. This continuous solitude shapes resilience, self-reliance, and a slow, steady form of patience that permeates daily life. Isolation also affects the social perception of time and events. News from neighbors, markets, A distant town travels slowly, often arriving days or weeks after it occurs. Letters or visits are infrequent and may carry outdated information. This temporal delay encourages a focus on immediate surroundings and tasks, rather than distant concerns. Every small interaction becomes meaningful, carefully observed and remembered. Routine visits from traveling merchants, clergy, or officials are anticipated with attention and plan around ongoing work. Conversations are practical, concise, and focuses on survival rather than idle chatter. Life in isolation develops a rhythm where small gestures and words are magnified in importance. While most hours remain quiet and introspective, the mind adapts to this measured pace, learning patience, anticipation, and observation as essential skills for enduring both labor and solitude. The seasons intensify the sense of isolation, with winter often being the most pronounced. Short days and early darkness limit travel, while cold, snow, or ice make distant contact nearly impossible. Family members remain confined to the house or nearby barns for warmth, reducing social interaction even further. Work continues in necessary ways, tending animals, maintaining tools, or preparing firewood, but it is slower and more deliberate. The quiet of winter allows for reflection on past labor and planning for the coming year. Stories, memories, and practical lessons circulate within the household, providing mental stimulation without requiring external contact. Even in summer, when light allows for extended work in fields and gardens, neighbors may be too distant for daily interaction. The isolation imposed by distance, environment, and necessity shapes a continuous, reflective rhythm that informs both action and perception. Days are counted not by social events, but by labor completed, meals eaten, and the slow passage of sunlight. Isolation affects not only the mental experience of life, but also the practical coordination of tasks without neighbors or community help nearby. Farmers must anticipate needs carefully, preparing tools, feed, and seeds in advance. Mistakes or oversights can have immediate consequences as no assistance is available to compensate. This creates a disciplined attention to detail, a habit of planning, and a quiet mindfulness that permeates daily work. The farmer learns to move efficiently, to manage time slowly but steadily, and to balance effort with endurance. Even leisure, such as tending a small garden, reading, or observing wildlife, is framed by self-reliance and quiet reflection. The body and mind remain engaged in a continuous rhythm shaped by necessity, labor, and observation. Isolation, while steady and pervasive, fosters competence, endurance, a subtle appreciation for small victories. It forms the backdrop against which all daily life unfolds, creating both challenge and continuity in equal measure over long periods. Isolation teaches subtle emotional regulation and patience. Frustration, fear, or fatigue are met with measured responses, as there is no one to offer immediate reassurance or distraction. Observing the environment carefully becomes both a mental exercise and a practical necessity, allowing the farmer to detect changes in weather, crop health, or animal behavior. Even boredom is approached with calm acceptance. Filled with quiet observation or contemplation of daily tasks, the mind adapts to the slow, repetitive, and solitary nature of life, developing endurance and internal rhythm. Days, weeks, and seasons blend together, forming a steady, predictable pattern that offers comfort even within its demands. Awareness of the passage of time is both keen and patient, guided by light, labor, and natural cycles rather than social activity. Isolation, though pervasive, becomes a framework for existence rather than a source of despair. It cultivates self-reliance, reflection, and a measured appreciation for the quiet persistence of daily life. Evenings in isolation carry their own rhythms, blending labor with quiet observation and preparation for the following day. Tasks like feeding animals, checking fences, and maintaining tools continue in subdued, methodical ways. Conversations within the household, if any, are functional and calm, often focuses on planning or practical problem solving. The body is fatigued and attention shifts toward rest, meals, and the organization of resources. The mind drifts slowly, reflecting on tasks completed, anticipating future labor, or observing the subtle changes in weather and light. Candles or oil lamps provide soft illumination, reinforcing a gentle, steady pace. Even when darkness falls, the sense of isolation continues to shape perception, creating a calm awareness of both space and time. Quiet supports contemplation, reflection, and mental organization, linking daily labor with ongoing survival. Days pass with deliberate consistency, measured by the tasks completed and the ongoing endurance required to maintain life in solitude, whether controls your mood, income, and survival on a 19th century American farm, shaping every aspect of daily life with quiet but unwavering authority. Each day begins with a careful observation of the sky, noting cloud formations, wind direction, and the feel of humidity or chill in the air. Rain can be both a blessing and a burden. Gentle showers nourish crops, while heavy storms threaten to wash away seeds or erode soil. Sunshine warms the body and provides light for labor, but excessive heat drains energy and slows progress. Cold, frost, or snow requires preparation, additional layers of clothing, and careful attention to animals and stored crops. The rhythm of work is inseparable from the rhythm of weather, dictating when fields can be plowed, planted, weeded, or harvested. Mood follows this pattern quietly. A clear, calm day can bring a sense of satisfaction and steadiness, while an approaching storm may stir unease or measured anxiety. Income is tied directly to weather's whims, as crop success depends on conditions over which the farmer has little control. Even small variations, a dry spell, a late frost, or an unexpected downpour can ripple through the household, affecting food stores, labor distribution, and the quiet assurance of survival. Living attuned to these patterns creates a constant, gentle awareness of the environment, teaching patience, observation, and endurance over the years. Spring is perhaps the most critical season, as it sets the tone for both labor and livelihood. Warmth and rain must coincide to allow seeds to germinate properly. If frost lingers too long, fields remain too cold to work, delaying planting and increasing stress across the household. Excessive rain can leave soil too muddy to plow or plant, while drought can prevent seeds from taking root. The farmer's attention is concentrated, watching the sky and soil with careful patience. Daily routines adapt subtly, moving work indoors or toward maintenance tasks when the weather prevents field labor. Mood mirrors these fluctuations, gently rising with favorable conditions and dipping with setbacks. Long-term planning, such as anticipating harvest size or rationing preserved food, depends on reading these subtle environmental cues. The slow, repetitive work of planting becomes a meditation on control and unpredictability, embedding quiet resilience into the rhythm of life. Spring's challenges underscore the intimate connection between weather, labor, and survival, teaching lessons that persist through all seasons. Summer brings long hours of labor under the sun, with weather continuing to shape both effort and endurance. Days are hot and often humid, testing both body and mind. Crops require constant attention, watering, weeding, and watching for disease or insect damage. Storms may arrive unexpectedly, flattening plants or saturating soil in ways that hinder growth. Even small temperature shifts can affect the quality of fruits and grains, making careful observation essential. Mood responds to the sun and clouds, the calm skies fostering steady focus and turbulent weather prompting caution or swift action. Summer's labor demands endurance, as tasks must be completed under conditions that tire the body steadily throughout the day. Income depends on harvest projections, which are themselves dependent on the delicate balance of rain, sun, and soil quality. Patience and adaptation become central virtues, as the farmer learns to accept what cannot be changed while responding carefully to what can. Each day's work reinforces the connection between the environment and livelihood, embedding awareness of natural rhythms into daily life. Autumn is dominated by harvest, and weather dictates the timing and success of the season. Crops must be gathered before frost or rain can damage them, creating pressure that is both practical and psychological. Rain can slow harvesting, while unexpected warmth may extend the working day or hasten crop maturity. Each decision when to begin, how to allocate labor, which crops to prioritize is guided by observation of the sky, wind, and ground conditions. Income is directly affected, as the amount and quality of the harvest determines both immediate food security and market prospects. Mood may fluctuate gently from satisfaction at progress made to quiet worry over potential losses. Even small variations in temperature or precipitation are noted carefully, influencing decisions on storage, preservation, and rationing. The rhythm of daily labor is intensified by this awareness, combining physical exertion with continuous observation. Autumn teaches careful timing, resilience, and patience, reinforcing the slow, attentive habits developed throughout the year. The farmer becomes attuned to the land and weather in ways that are subtle but persistent, shaping both daily experience and long-term survival. Winter brings its own challenges, with weather controlling both activity and mood in different ways. Cold, snow, and frost limit field work, requiring adjustments to daily routines and creative use of remaining indoor tasks. Livestock must be carefully fed and sheltered, and stored crops monitored for spoilage or loss. The farmer moves slowly, balancing labor with conservation of energy, while awareness of ice, snowdrifts, and frozen ground shapes planning and execution of every task. Mood may fluctuate gently, influenced by cold, light, and the limitations imposed by environment. Income is largely deferred, reliant on the careful preservation of food and the productivity of animals during lean months. Social isolation, already present, is magnified as travel becomes difficult and neighbors are distant. Even small chores take longer and require thoughtful attention to prevent accidents or loss. Winter reinforces the understanding that survival depends on slow, deliberate effort, observation, and planning. The season teaches acceptance, patience, and endurance, emphasizing that life proceeds according to the rhythms of nature rather than human desire. Weather also influences the pace and rhythm of daily labor in subtle ways. Heavy rain may slow tasks, creating a natural pause that encourages observation or minor maintenance work indoors. High winds require extra caution when repairing fences or handling tools. Heat drains energy, necessitating slower movement and frequent small rests. Even the scent of the air, damp with moisture or carrying the dryness of sun-baked soil, signals changes that inform decisions about work and focus. Awareness of these environmental details is constant, shaping movement, timing, and expectations without dramatic alarm. The farmer's mind attunes to gradual shifts in sky, wind, and temperature, creating a quiet connection between observation and action. Emotional responses remain calm, modulated by understanding that the environment is both powerful and predictable in its cycles. Daily life becomes a negotiation with the weather, blending endurance, observation, and practical adaptation. The rhythm of labor and rest flows naturally from these subtle cues, forming a continuous, measured pace. Unexpected weather events test both preparation and psychological endurance. A sudden storm may threaten crops or animals, requiring swift but deliberate response. A dry spell may challenge water supply and force rationing or careful irrigation. Even small shifts, fog, early frost, or a prolonged warm period carry consequences that must be addressed. The farmer learns to respond steadily, balancing immediate action with long-term considerations. Anxiety is tempered by experience, observation, and the understanding that effort, patience, and careful attention often mitigate risk. Work and thought proceed at a deliberate pace, synchronized with the unfolding environment rather than hurried by it. Income and survival are quietly tethered to these natural rhythms, teaching humility and long-term awareness. Mood, effort, and attention ebb and flow in parallel with changes in weather, reinforcing the slow, enduring cadence of life. Through careful observation and adaptation, the farmer develops resilience that extends beyond labor to encompass both mind and body. The intimate relationship between weather and survival shapes decision-making across the farm. Crop selection, planting schedules, and harvesting priorities are all influenced by anticipated conditions, storage, and preservation. Methods are adjusted according to humidity, temperature, and expected seasonal change. Even minor tasks such as mending a fence or tending animals are paced and scheduled with environmental conditions in mind. This careful attention creates a slow, deliberate rhythm that governs both work and rest. Observing the sky, reading clouds, and feeling shifts in air temperature becomes second nature, guiding action without conscious effort. Decisions that might appear small to an outsider carry quiet weight in maintaining health, food supply, and productivity. The farmer's life is intertwined with natural forces, demanding patience, observation, and calm persistence. Mood, labor, and survival are inseparable from the changing environment, reinforcing the intimate, enduring dialogue between human and land. The narration emphasizes slowness, repetition, and physical fatigue, capturing the quiet rhythm of life on a 19th century American farm in a way that immerses both mind and body into its gentle, measured pace. Each day begins with a deliberate rise before dawn, the body moving slowly through familiar motions as the first light touches the horizon. Tasks unfold in predictable patterns, feeding animals, tending crops, repairing tools, and maintaining fences, each action repeated across days, weeks, and seasons. The hands grow calloused, muscles ache from constant bending, lifting, and pulling, yet the effort is steady and measured rather than frantic or hurried. Rhythm of labor is punctuated by small pauses for meals, brief rests, and the quiet observation of the environment, which provides subtle mental relief from the physical exertion. Repetition becomes both burden and comfort, offering a predictable structure while gently wearing the body into endurance. The mind, tuned to these cycles, develops a calm, patient focus, observing small changes in weather, animal behavior, and crop growth with steady attention. Fatigue is present but managed. The body learns its limits, and the slow, continuous exertion trains both resilience and patience. Work proceeds without rush, guided by necessity and the slow passage of sunlight, forming a cadence that underpins every aspect of farm life. The sense of slowness infuses daily existence, creating a quiet meditation through physical effort where each repeated motion becomes a rhythm in itself, carrying both labor and reflection forward. Physical fatigue accumulates gradually, shaping the pace of thought as much as the pace of labor. From dawn until dusk, the body moves through the repetitive motions of plowing, planting, harvesting, and tending livestock. Each motion is deliberate, conserving energy for the long hours ahead, while ensuring that necessary work is completed with care. Even the simplest chores require sustained attention and physical effort. From carrying water to stacking firewood, each task leaving a subtle mark of weariness. Muscles adapt to repetition, developing strength, but the soreness and tension are constant companions, a quiet reminder of endurance. Mental focus adjusts accordingly. The mind learns to flow with physical rhythms rather than resist them, observing the environment and anticipating necessary actions while completing each repetitive task. Fatigue is therefore both physical and mental, intertwining body and mind in the slow, ongoing effort to sustain life. The quiet repetition, though exhausting, offers a gentle predictability, a framework within which survival and daily activity unfold. Each day ends with tired limbs and a measured sense of accomplishment, reinforcing the rhythm of life dictated by labor, light, and seasons. The slow, deliberate exertion becomes meditative, linking repetition and fatigue into a continuous, calming pattern. Repetition extends beyond individual tasks to entire routines, forming a cycle that mirrors the seasons themselves. Planting, weeding, watering, and harvesting recur throughout spring, summer, and autumn. Each repetition subtly different yet fundamentally similar. Feeding and caring for animals follows daily schedules, requiring early morning and late evening attention, maintaining a constant rhythm of physical and mental labor. Each repeated motion reinforces skill and endurance, yet also reinforces the slow passage of time, where days blend seamlessly into weeks and months. The mind, engaged in both labor and observation, notices small variations, the texture of soil, color of leaves, the subtle shifts in weather that influence the outcome of work. Repetition fosters patience and careful attention, creating a quiet rhythm that harmonizes with natural cycles. Even fatigue becomes a steady companion, a measure of effort and persistence rather than a source of discouragement. The interplay of repetition, observation, and exertion forms the backbone of daily life, linking body, mind, and environment in a continuous, deliberate pattern. The slow unfolding of each day mirrors the slow progression of the seasons, each repeated act contributing to both immediate survival and long-term continuity. Slowness is an essential companion to repetition and fatigue, shaping both work and perception. Tasks cannot be rushed without risk of error, injury, or loss, and the farmer moves with deliberate care, pacing each motion according to its weight and importance. Even seemingly simple chores, stirring porridge, stacking hay, mending a fence, require measured attention, reinforcing a quiet mindfulness. The rhythm of the day is set by natural cues, sunlight, weather, animal needs rather than artificial clocks. This slowness provides a calming structure, turning labor into a steady meditation rather than a frantic struggle. The body, aware of its limits, guides the mind toward measured pacing, conserving energy for the long hours ahead. Mental focus follows the same rhythm, gently observing surroundings, adjusting plans, and anticipating needs without haste. Over weeks and months, this deliberate pace becomes instinctive, a quiet harmony between effort, endurance, and attention. Fatigue, though constant, is absorbed into this rhythm, becoming an unspoken measure of the day's labor. Slowness allows for observation, reflection, and adaptation, weaving a calm consistency through the cycles of work and life. The interaction of slowness, repetition, and fatigue creates a subtle, almost meditative awareness of the day. Each motion is repeated carefully, reinforcing muscle memory while giving the mind space to observe and reflect. The monotony of labor is softened by small variations, a bird singing in a distant tree, the smell of freshly turned soil, or a breeze carrying the scent of nearby grass or water. These small details punctuate the otherwise steady cadence of work, providing mental relief without disrupting the rhythm of effort. The body adapts gradually to physical demands, while the mind moves between concentration and gentle observation, forming a balance between exertion and awareness. Fatigue is integrated into this rhythm, a quiet companion rather than a sudden interruption. Tasks that once seemed arduous become familiar, almost automatic, yet still require measured attention to detail and care. The continuous repetition reinforces endurance, patience, and calm, embedding both physical and mental discipline into daily existence. Passage of time is marked by labor itself, creating a comforting predictability in an otherwise demanding life. Through this interplay, each day achieves a quiet, steady flow, where fatigue, slowness, and repetition are not obstacles but essential components of existence. Repetition also influences the mental experience of work, shaping attention, memory, and anticipation. Each day, the farmer performs similar tasks, yet the mind observes variations in environment, animal behavior, and crop growth. Patterns are recognized, problems anticipated, and solutions rehearsed quietly before being executed. The slow, repeated motions provide a framework for this cognitive engagement, linking action with thought in a continuous feedback loop. Fatigue moderates the pace of thought, preventing overexertion while allowing careful reflection and planning. The rhythm of repetition and slowness provides a gentle reassurance, reinforcing competence and awareness through experience. The mind, while engaged in routine labor, develops a quiet attentiveness, noticing details that might escape casual observation. Each completed task becomes both a physical accomplishment and a mental anchor, reinforcing stability and endurance. This integration of body, mind, and environment forms a continuous, deliberate pattern, shaping the quiet, measured existence that defines farm life. Fatigue, repetition, and slowness work together to create a rhythm that is both calming and enduring. Even small tasks carry significance when approached with the deliberate pace required by labor and fatigue. Sweeping the floor, chopping kindling, or mending clothing are performed slowly. Each motion precise and purposeful. Attention is maintained on the quality of work, the tools used, and the surrounding environment. Mistakes are avoided through patience and repetition, while efficiency emerges gradually through careful practice rather than haste. The body absorbs these small exertions over time, developing endurance and resilience without dramatic strain. Mental focus remains calm, engaged, and alert, attuned to both immediate tasks and larger patterns of work. The steady accumulation of labor, however minor, contributes to survival, comfort, and the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment. Repetition, slowness, and fatigue together cultivate a sense of rhythm and purpose, transforming ordinary tasks into a continuous meditation on life and endurance. This careful integration of mind and body defines the tempo of the day, providing structure, reassurance, and the subtle comfort of measured effort. The day's end brings reflection on the cumulative effect of slowness, repetition, and fatigue. Limbs are tired, hands calloused, and muscles gently sore, yet there is a quiet satisfaction in completed work. Tasks performed carefully and repeatedly sustain both survival and household stability. The mind drifts slowly between memories of the day's labor, observations of the environment, and anticipation of tomorrow's needs. Fatigue reinforces the rhythm of rest, encouraging sleep at dusk in preparation for another day of measured exertion. Repetition fosters both skill and endurance, while slowness ensures attention to detail and avoidance of mistakes. The quiet interplay of these elements defines life on the farm, shaping both physical and mental experience. Days blend into one another, each marked by the steady cadence of labor, observation, and gentle fatigue. This rhythm becomes a framework for endurance, reflection, and calm, preparing both body and mind for the next day. Through slowness, repetition, and fatigue, the life of the 19th century American farmer unfolds in a continuous, measured, and quietly reassuring pattern. Focus on Lincoln's quiet years, labor, self-education, loss, and patience, unfolding a chapter of American history that is often overshadowed by later fame, yet deeply instructive in its slow, deliberate rhythm. Abraham Lincoln, long before he became president, lived a life marked by steady, unhurried effort and careful observation of the world around him. His days were occupied with physical labor from dawn to dusk, whether splitting rails for fences, clearing timber, or performing household chores, each task undertaken with measured attention and quiet diligence. This work, though physically taxing, shaped his understanding of endurance, discipline, and the incremental nature of achievement. Between these laborious hours, he pursued self-education, reading borrowed books, studying grammar, arithmetic, and the principles of law, often by the dim light of a small lamp or fireplace, which was acquired slowly in fragments as he absorbed lessons from each text, contemplating the ideas and their applications with patience and care. Loss was an unrelenting companion, with the death of his mother, the deaths of close friends, and the hardships faced by his family leaving a quiet imprint on his character. These experiences fostered resilience, reflection, and a steady temperament, preparing him for the complex challenges of adult life. Lincoln's quiet years were not marked by sudden triumphs, but by the accumulation of effort, observation, and learning that would later inform his leadership. Patience became both habit and necessity, cultivated through repeated labor, careful reading, reflection on the fleeting nature of personal and communal stability. Each day in his youth reinforced the slow, deliberate development of mind and character, blending endurance, loss, and study into a rhythm that mirrored the broader patterns of 19th century life. Lincoln's work as a rail splitter exemplifies the slow, steady accumulation of experience that defined his early years. The physical labor of felling trees, splitting timber, and preparing fences was repetitive and exhausting, yet it offered lessons beyond mere survival. Each split rail required precision, care, and strength, teaching focus, patience, and perseverance. The body became attuned to the demands of labor, but the mind developed an appreciation for the quiet progress that results from steady effort. In this physical work, Lincoln cultivated both endurance and reflection, often thinking through problems or observing human nature while performing repetitive motions. Labor and contemplation intertwined, creating a foundation for reasoning, empathy, and problem solving. The rhythm of manual effort mirrored the rhythm of learning, each day passing in quiet, steady progress. Fatigue was ever present but managed with care, reinforcing the notion that progress often comes gradually and requires consistent attention. These early experiences shaped a temperament capable of long-term planning, patient observation, and careful judgment. Through the simple, repetitive, and physically demanding work of rail splitting, Lincoln developed a mindset grounded in patience, resilience, and thoughtful engagement with the world. Lincoln's early work as a clerk and shop assistant introduced another layer of quiet, measured learning. In these roles, he dealt with accounts, correspondence, and the careful tracking of goods and transactions, requiring attention to detail, honesty, and methodical thought. Each ledger entry demanded precision, each calculation patience, and each interaction with customers or employers careful observation of social cues. These experiences, though unremarkable in appearance, contributed to the development of Lincoln's disciplined mind and reflective temperament. The work required long hours of concentrated thought, often in a quiet room or sparsely furnished store. Their pace was dictated by accuracy rather than speed. Mistakes had consequences, yet each error was also a lesson, slowly teaching diligence, attention, and the value of incremental improvement. During these periods, Lincoln balanced labor with reading and reflection, studying law, literature, and political thought with the same patient attention he applied to practical tasks. The repetition of clerical work mirrored the repetition of labor on the farm, reinforcing habits of careful observation, methodical planning, and quiet perseverance. These years of slow, steady effort formed the foundation for his later capacity to lead, debate, and make decisions under pressure. Through daily tasks performed with patience and precision, Lincoln's character and intellect were shaped gradually, preparing him for future responsibilities that would demand endurance and measured judgment. Self-education during Lincoln's quiet years was a cornerstone of his gradual development, pursued in the spaces between labor, isolation, and reflection. Books were scarce and often borrowed from neighbors or traveling acquaintances. Yet each volume offered insight into law, history, ethics, and rhetoric. Lincoln read slowly, digesting sentences carefully, pausing to reflect on meaning, implications, applications to life and society. Writing and copying passages by hand reinforced memory and comprehension, turning reading into a tactile, deliberate process. Lessons were absorbed not in a single sitting but over days and weeks, integrating into a broader understanding that matured gradually. Observation of human behavior, local politics, and social interaction supplemented textual learning, creating a continuous interplay between theory and practice. Through repeated reflection, Lincoln honed critical thinking, moral reasoning, and a calm analytical perspective. Loss and hardship, including the death of his mother and other personal setbacks, deepened his contemplative nature, shaping empathy and resilience alongside intellectual growth. Combination of physical labor, clerical work, and patient study produced a mind capable of measured thought, careful judgment, and sustained attention. Lincoln's self-education exemplifies the slow accumulation of knowledge that defines the quiet years. Process intertwined with experience, endurance, and reflection. Loss and personal hardship were ever present, contributing to Lincoln's quiet endurance and patient character. The death of his mother during his childhood was a profound event, leaving emotional gaps and practical responsibilities that demanded early maturity. Subsequent losses, including friends, mentors, and colleagues, reinforced the impermanence and fragility of life. These experiences were not dramatic in a sensational sense but unfolded slowly, Shaping the rhythm of reflection and adaptation that governed daily life, Lincoln learned to manage grief alongside labor, study, and daily responsibilities, integrating emotional experience into a practical, measured approach to living. The repetition of daily tasks provided a framework for continuity, a subtle reassurance amidst the inevitability of loss. Reflection on mortality, hardship, and human frailty became intertwined with observation, reading, and contemplation of ethical and political questions. Patience emerged not only from labor and study, but also from endurance. In the face of recurring setbacks, emotional resilience was cultivated quietly, reinforcing habits of measured thought, careful judgment, and steady attention. Through these experiences, Lincoln developed a temperament suited to observation, reflection, and thoughtful decision-making, laying the foundation for later leadership. Loss became both a teacher and a companion, shaping quiet strength and reflective depth. The development of patience during Lincoln's early years was a product of the interplay between labor, study, and hardship. Each day demanded sustained attention, whether splitting rails, keeping accounts, or reading by lamplight. Success was incremental, dependent on repeated effort and careful observation rather than sudden triumph. Patience was reinforced through the slow acquisition of knowledge, the methodical practice of law, and the long hours of unglamorous labor that left the body tired but the mind alert. Emotional regulation, cultivated through exposure to loss and hardship, further supported this enduring calm. The rhythms of rural and small-town life provided both structure and expectation, allowing Lincoln to internalize the value of persistence over impulsivity. Observing the slow development of crops, the steady progression of seasons, and the gradual improvement of personal skill all reinforced a deep understanding of incremental achievement. Reflection, study, and repetitive labor intertwined, producing a temperament capable of deliberate thought, careful judgment, and sustained focus. Patience became both habit and strategy, forming the quiet foundation upon which later intellectual, political, and leadership abilities were built. Lincoln's quiet years illustrate the fusion of ordinary labor with contemplative observation, forming the bedrock of his later character. Physical work grounded him in reality, teaching endurance, rhythm, and the value of effort. Clerical tasks and self-study honed precision, reasoning, and intellectual curiosity. Loss and hardship cultivated resilience, empathy, and a reflective temperament. Each component was experienced slowly, repeatedly, and with measured attention, blending seamlessly into the continuous rhythm of daily life. Observation of human behavior, the environment, and social structures added subtle depth to his understanding of morality, fairness, and decision-making. Fatigue and challenge were absorbed into daily routine, reinforcing mental and physical discipline. The combination of patience, labor, study, reflection formed a framework of endurance and insight. Quiet years, though unremarkable to casual observers, created the conditions for extraordinary capacity in thought, judgment, and leadership. The slow accumulation of skill, knowledge, and character through deliberate, measured practice exemplifies the power of ordinary life to shape extraordinary individuals. Even in moments of solitude or repetitive work, Lincoln's mind remained active, reflecting on principles, observing patterns, and rehearsing ideas. The isolation and slow rhythm of life provided space for thought and contemplation, allowing concepts to mature over days or weeks. Ideas about law, governance, morality, and human behavior developed gradually, integrated with experience and observation rather than imposed suddenly. Labor, fatigue, and repetition were not obstacles to thought but facilitators, structuring time and attention. Each small accomplishment, whether a corrected ledger entry, a successfully split rail, or a memorized legal passage, reinforced discipline and a sense of progress. The quiet, patient approach to both work and study became a habit of mind, a consistent framework for decision-making. Loss and hardship added reflective depth, teaching careful observation of consequences, human behavior, and ethical responsibility through steady accumulation of effort, knowledge, and reflection. Lincoln's early years produced a slow but profound development of character. The quiet labor of ordinary life thus became the foundation of extraordinary endurance, patience, and insight. His routines as a rail splitter, clerk, and small-town lawyer shaped a quiet, steady rhythm in Abraham Lincoln's life, emphasizing gradual skill development, patient observation, and consistent effort over sudden achievement or public recognition. As a rail splitter, he rose early, moving deliberately through the physical tasks of felling trees, splitting logs, and building fences, each swing of the axe requiring care, attention, and steady endurance. The repetition of labor reinforced strength, precision, and patience, while also allowing the mind to wander, reflect, and plan, forming a quiet dialogue between thought and action. Later, as a clerk and store assistant, Lincoln's days were filled with careful record-keeping, calculations, and correspondence, each task requiring concentration and meticulous attention to detail. The work was repetitive yet meaningful, teaching responsibility, accuracy, and the value of small, consistent efforts in maintaining order and trust. Each ledger entry, each recorded transaction became a small lesson in diligence, methodical thinking, and the practicalities of daily commerce. When he transitioned into the role of a small-town lawyer, these habits of patience, careful observation, and methodical work carried over seamlessly, preparing legal documents, studying cases, and interacting with clients required thoughtful attention, deliberate pacing, and a calm, measured approach to problem solving. Long hours were spent reading and writing, consulting legal texts, and reflecting on precedents, all conducted in the quiet, often solitary spaces of his office or home. Through these routines, Lincoln's life was structured around steady, incremental learning, patience, and careful attention to both detail and principle, laying the foundation for the mental resilience and reflective thinking that would define his later career. Each occupation reinforced a consistent rhythm of labor, reflection, and growth that shaped Lincoln's character. As a rail splitter, the repetitive swing of the axe created a meditative cadence, fostering endurance and a deep awareness of effort and consequence. Each fence build or rail split was an exercise in precision, patience, and perseverance, linking physical work with the quiet accumulation of skill and confidence. Transitioning to clerical work introduced a slower, mental form of labor, emphasizing careful calculation, record-keeping, and observation of patterns in human behavior. Every entry in a ledger required steady focus and attention to detail, reinforcing habits of accuracy and thoughtfulness. This work also taught patience, as the effects of diligence were seen gradually, rather than immediately, building a sense of measured accomplishment. When practicing law, Lincoln combined these lessons, applying meticulous study, careful preparation, and methodical reasoning to each case. Observing clients, reading statutes, and drafting documents demanded both reflection and attention, echoing the patient rhythms established in previous occupations. Even small tasks such as walking to the courthouse or conversing with townspeople were approached deliberately, reinforcing the importance of thoughtful observation and steady engagement. The slow, repetitive, and disciplined routines of these occupations cultivated endurance, mental focus, and a reflective mindset. Each day reinforced incremental growth, preparing Lincoln for responsibilities that required both patience and careful judgment. The physical demands of being a rail splitter offered more than mere strength training. They fostered a deep connection between effort, time, and reflection. Hours were spent outdoors, observing changing weather, soil conditions, and the growth of surrounding crops and trees. Every action, from swinging the axe to stacking split rails, demanded precision and awareness, linking physical exertion with mental alertness. This repetitive labor encouraged a steady mindset, where patience and rhythm became natural companions to endurance. Even in isolation, the work allowed for contemplation, with Lincoln often thinking through problems, ideas, or strategies as he labored. The slow accumulation of skill reinforced a belief in gradual progress. Where effort over time yielded tangible results, fatigue was present but managed, providing both a measure of exertion and a sense of accomplishment when tasks were completed. Repetition and slowness became a framework for both physical and mental development, instilling habits of observation, careful planning, and quiet reflection. These experiences laid the foundation for Lincoln's later capacity to navigate complex legal and political challenges with calm persistence. The rhythm of labor, observation, and thought became a central element of his life, shaping both character and intellect. Clerical work introduced a quieter, more mental form of repetitive discipline. Blending reflection with responsibility. As a clerk, Lincoln balanced precision and patience, carefully managing ledgers, correspondence, and accounts for small-town businesses. Each entry demanded attention to detail, requiring careful review and double-checking to ensure accuracy. Mistakes were noticeable and consequential, teaching careful focus and deliberate action. This work also offered opportunities for quiet observation of human behavior as customers, colleagues, and townspeople revealed subtle patterns, habits, and priorities. Long hours of clerical labor encouraged a calm, deliberate approach to problem solving and planning. Mental fatigue, like physical fatigue, was managed with measured pacing and attention to rest. Through repetition, attention to detail, and careful observation, Lincoln developed habits of methodical thinking and patience that would carry over into law and public life. Each day reinforced the connection between steady effort, accuracy, and incremental accomplishment, forming a quiet, reliable rhythm that shaped both work ethic and cognitive endurance. The slow accumulation of skill, knowledge, and observation became a defining pattern in his early adulthood. As a small-town lawyer, Lincoln's routines blended learned habits from physical labor and clerical work with new challenges in reasoning, argumentation, and public service. Each case required careful preparation, reading legal texts, consulting precedents, and drafting documents, all conducted with deliberate attention and slow pacing. Client interactions were measured, thoughtful, and attentive, requiring observation, patience, and empathy. Even routine court appearances demanded careful attention to procedure, timing, and detail. Lincoln's previous experience in labor and clerical tasks reinforced his capacity for sustained attention and meticulous work. Legal research and writing were integrated into daily routines, balancing reading, reflection, and practice with the ongoing demands of community life. Petition, whether in drafting similar documents or observing court procedures, reinforced methodical habits, calm reasoning, and patient problem solving. Fatigue, both mental and physical, was managed through pacing, attention to rhythm, and awareness of limits. The quiet, deliberate routines of legal work allowed Lincoln to integrate knowledge, reflection, and observation, building a foundation for more complex intellectual and moral reasoning. These routines exemplify the slow, steady growth of skill, character, and endurance that defined his early professional life. Even outside of labor and legal work, Lincoln's days included careful observation and contemplation, forming a continuous cycle of reflection and incremental learning. Time spent traveling between farms, towns, or court sessions provided opportunities for observation, reflection, and mental rehearsal. Natural landscapes, the routines of townspeople, and the interactions of neighbors became subjects of quiet attention and contemplation. Thoughts about fairness, justice, morality, and human behavior were woven into these reflections, integrating experience with study, repetition, and travel observation. And work reinforced habits of attention, patience, and careful planning. Each day, whether dominated by physical labor, clerical work, or legal practice, contributed to cumulative growth in endurance, reasoning, and character. Fatigue and routine were not obstacles, but part of the steady rhythm that structured life, providing continuity and subtle guidance for reflection. Through slow, repeated engagement with work, people, and environment, Lincoln cultivated a deep reservoir of practical knowledge, judgment, and resilience. The deliberate, measured nature of these routines formed the backbone of his early development, preparing him for the complex demands of leadership and public life. The interplay of labor, clerical work, and law practice illustrates a life shaped by patience, repetition, and reflection. Physical exertion builds strength and endurance. Clerical work refined attention to detail and responsibility, and legal practice cultivated reasoning, observation, and judgment. Each activity, approached deliberately, contributed to the slow accumulation of skill, knowledge, and personal resilience. Fatigue was an expected companion managed through pacing, rest, and steady repetition. The quiet rhythm of daily work created a framework for reflection, careful planning, and gradual intellectual growth. Even minor tasks carried significance, reinforcing habits of diligence, accuracy, and perseverance. Repetition in diverse contexts strengthened mental discipline and adaptability, preparing Lincoln for future challenges. Careful structuring of routines, attention to incremental progress, and balance between labor and thought exemplify the measured, deliberate pace that characterized his early life. Through these daily patterns, Lincoln developed patience, resilience, and reflective depth, quietly preparing for the responsibilities that would later define him as a leader and thinker. Emotional restraint and long periods of obscurity characterized much of Abraham Lincoln's early life, shaping a temperament that was calm, patient, and quietly reflective. Well before public recognition or political prominence, his youth and early adulthood were marked by modest circumstances, physical labor, and personal loss. Each experience teaching careful control of emotion and steady endurance in the face of uncertainty. Losses such as the death of his mother and close friends were not dramatized but absorbed slowly, leaving a gentle imprint on character that encouraged reflection rather than impulsive reaction. During long stretches of work as a rail splitter, clerk, or small-town lawyer, Lincoln often faced solitude and minimal external recognition, reinforcing patience and the habit of observing consequences before action. Emotional restraint was cultivated gradually through repeated experience where frustration, disappointment, or grief could not be expressed impulsively without practical repercussions. Quiet reflection became a natural response to challenges, allowing thought, planning, and measured response to develop in tandem with labor and study. The obscurity of his early life, far from centers of power or acclaim, reinforced the value of incremental progress, careful preparation, and resilience in the absence of immediate reward. Even in social interactions, Lincoln displayed a controlled temperament, listening carefully, considering responses, and avoiding rash judgment. These long, uneventful periods allowed the mind to integrate lessons from work, study, and observation, forming the basis for deliberate thought, ethical reasoning, and patient decision-making. Emotional restraint and obscurity, though unremarkable to outsiders, created the conditions for the measured, calm, reflective approach that would define his later leadership and thought. Long periods of obscurity were filled with steady, often repetitive work, observation, reflection, which quietly shaped both intellect and character. Each day was structured around labor, whether in the forest, office, or courtroom, with tasks repeated until skill and endurance were secured. Recognition was rare, and progress was often imperceptible to observers, reinforcing a focus on intrinsic effort rather than external reward. These circumstances encouraged patient observation of cause and effect, understanding the consequences of action without immediate feedback or validation. Emotional restraint was practiced continuously, moderating responses to setbacks, loss, or social misunderstanding. Even small interactions required careful attention, listening, and measured response, which reinforced calm judgment and the ability to delay gratification. The slow passage of time in obscurity became a teacher, providing space for reflection, study, and personal growth that might have been impossible in more public or hurried circumstances. Mental endurance was cultivated alongside physical stamina, as each day presented challenges of attention, patience, and persistent effort through repetition, reflection, and observation. Lincoln learned the quiet lessons of cause, effect, and human behavior. Obscurity, though often isolating, became a crucible for steady development of calm, reflective character, preparing him for responsibilities that would demand both judgment and patience. Emotional restraint was inseparable from daily life, particularly in contexts requiring careful observation and judgment. In courtrooms, interactions with clients, or discussions with neighbors, Lincoln maintained a calm demeanor, listening attentively and choosing responses deliberately. Frustration or impatience, though sometimes present internally, were managed silently, allowing reason and careful consideration to guide action. In labor-intensive work, physical fatigue reinforced mental moderation, as rashness or impulsivity could compromise both safety and productivity. Even in moments of grief or disappointment, emotion was integrated with reflection, fostering resilience and thoughtful decision-making. The slow rhythm of daily routines, combined with solitude, reinforced the practice of measured thought, quiet observation, and patient response. Emotional restraint was not an abstract ideal but a practical necessity, supporting both survival and social harmony in small town and rural contexts. Through continuous practice, Lincoln developed a deep sense of timing, judgment, and calm evaluation, which became a hallmark of his character. Reflection on past events, observation of human nature, and patient anticipation of outcomes intertwined to produce a deliberate, thoughtful temperament. This cultivation of calmness, observation, restraint formed the foundation for later leadership and decision-making under pressure. Obscurity also offered space for self-directed learning and reflection, complementing emotional control with intellectual development. The few public responsibilities or immediate rewards, Lincoln could devote attention to reading, writing, and contemplation, absorbing knowledge incrementally over time. Hours spent in study were quiet, methodical, and undistracted, allowing concepts and lessons to integrate deeply into understanding. Observation of human behavior, legal processes, and social interactions provided practical insights that complemented textual knowledge. Reflection during obscurity reinforced patience, measured response, and strategic thinking. As progress and recognition often occurred slowly or unpredictably, emotional restraint allowed him to navigate setbacks in learning or work without undue discouragement, turning obstacles into lessons for careful planning and thoughtful adjustment. Solitude and limited external recognition created conditions for deep concentration and sustained focus, fostering both mental endurance and reflective capacity. These periods emphasized the value of steady accumulation of skill, understanding, and judgment over immediate impact or dramatic action. Through obscurity, Lincoln developed a quiet, resilient confidence built not on acclaim but on mastery of self-work and observation. The combination of solitude, labor, and study provided a natural environment for the patient, contemplative, and deliberate temperament that would later define his public life. The repetition and calm pacing of daily routines further reinforced emotional restraint. During periods of obscurity, repetitive tasks, whether in legal preparation, clerical work, or physical labor, provided a structured framework in which emotions could be observed, moderated, and integrated without disruption. The mind learned to engage with challenges slowly, weighing options, consequences, and potential outcomes before acting. Small successes achieved incrementally reinforced confidence and patience, while setbacks were absorbed without alarm, viewed as natural parts of ongoing effort. Observation of others, from townspeople to colleagues, provided models of behavior, demonstrating the practical value of measured action and quiet judgment. Physical and mental fatigue created natural boundaries for exertion, reinforcing awareness of limits and the need for deliberate pacing. Each day's rhythm of work, reflection, and careful interaction strengthened both emotional control and cognitive endurance. The slow, deliberate progression of daily life offered a living lesson in patience, focus, and resilience. Emotional restraint became habitual, embedded in routine and reinforced by the quiet passage of time. Through these practices, Lincoln developed a temperament capable of steady judgment, calm response, reflective decision-making even in the absence of external validation. Periods of obscurity also allowed for careful observation of social, political, and economic patterns that informed later leadership. Walking through towns, observing court cases, or engaging in civic duties provided insight into human behavior, governance, and the distribution of resources. These observations, taken quietly and without urgency, contributed to an understanding of cause and effect, fairness, and strategic thinking. Emotional restraint was critical in interpreting these experiences without overreaction, maintaining calm observation while noting subtleties. The slow integration of knowledge from diverse sources, reading, conversation, observation, and experience reinforced the patient, measured approach to learning and decision-making. Even failures, disputes, or misunderstandings became lessons in patience, judgment, and the long-term consequences of action. Over time, the combination of quiet observation, measured engagement, and reflection produced a resilient, deliberate character. Obscurity offered both protection from external pressure and a laboratory for cultivating reasoned thought, patience, and empathy. Emotional restraint allowed Lincoln to navigate complex social and professional situations calmly, observing, learning, and preparing for future responsibility. The unhurried accumulation of experience, knowledge, and self-mastery during these years created the foundation for a deliberate, thoughtful, and patient leadership style. Fatigue, repetition, reflection intertwined with obscurity to reinforce the slow development of character and intellect. Long hours of labor and study required both mental and physical endurance, while solitude provided space for observation and contemplation. Repetition of work and study fostered incremental improvement, attention to detail, and careful planning. Emotional restraint ensured that setbacks, loss, or social tension did not disrupt the steady rhythm of growth and reflection. Observation of patterns, consequences, and human behavior became integrated with experience, forming a subtle but powerful foundation for judgment and decision-making. Patience was practiced daily in small, quiet acts, reinforcing a temperament capable of sustained effort and measured thought. Obscurity allowed Lincoln to develop skills and knowledge without the pressure of immediate recognition or reward, embedding resilience, reflection, and deliberate pacing into character. Each day's quiet labor, study, and observation built slowly toward competence, judgment, and foresight. Through these experiences, Lincoln's temperament became steady, reflective, and prepared for the responsibilities and challenges that lay ahead. Emotional restraint and obscurity, though unremarkable externally, shaped the enduring patience, calm judgment, reflective depth that defined his early life. The slow formation of ideas rather than dramatic turning points defined Abraham Lincoln's early intellectual development, illustrating how patient observation, careful reflection, and incremental learning shaped his mind over years of quiet effort. Unlike the stories of sudden inspiration or immediate success, Lincoln's understanding of law, governance, morality, and human nature grew gradually, each concept absorbed slowly and carefully. Days spent laboring, reading, observing, or interacting with townspeople became opportunities for reflection, allowing ideas to mature and integrate into a coherent worldview. Legal studies were approached methodically with attention to precedent, principle, and practical application, reinforcing the habit of measured thought. Observing social interactions, economic patterns, and political debates in small-town Illinois, Lincoln slowly recognized recurring patterns and underlying structures that guided human behavior. Each insight was considered quietly, often revisited and thought while performing routine work, creating a rhythm of reflection intertwined with physical and clerical labor. Ideas formed not in sudden flashes, but as accumulations of observation, experience, and study, gradually building a nuanced understanding of justice, responsibility, and human motivation. Even personal experiences of hardship, loss, and obscurity contributed to the formation of moral and ethical frameworks, slowly informing judgments and reasoning. Patience, repetition, and careful reflection allowed Lincoln to develop the capacity to consider multiple perspectives, weigh consequences, and recognize subtle nuances in both law and life. Through this slow, deliberate process, his intellectual and moral framework matured steadily, preparing him for the complexities of leadership, debate, and governance without the need for dramatic, attention-grabbing events. Lincoln's reading habits reinforced the gradual formation of ideas, emphasizing steady comprehension over rapid acquisition. Books were limited and often borrowed, so each volume required careful study, reflection, and repeated review. Legal texts, historical accounts, political essays, and literature provided a foundation for thought that was slowly absorbed over weeks and months. Sentences and paragraphs were contemplated, their meaning considered deeply, and implications for practice and moral reasoning examined. Ideas were tested in thought, integrated with observation of human behavior, and revisited as experience deepened understanding. The quiet rhythm of reading alongside labor and clerical work allowed reflection to accompany action, linking mind and body in a steady progression of learning. Incremental accumulation of knowledge reinforced both mental discipline and patience, teaching that understanding develops over time rather than through immediate revelation. Observations from daily life and work served as real-world tests of ideas, allowing Lincoln to refine his thinking gradually. This slow, deliberate approach cultivated reasoning, foresight, and the capacity to synthesize diverse sources of information into coherent principles. The combination of study, observation, reflection exemplified the gradual and patient formation of ideas central to his early intellectual life. Observation of human behavior and social patterns contributed to the slow development of Lincoln's thought. In courtrooms, stores, and small-town gatherings, he carefully noted how individuals interacted, how decisions were made, and how conflicts unfolded. Patterns emerged subtly over time, the consequences of fairness or dishonesty, the effects of patience or impulsiveness, and the unspoken rules governing behavior. Each observation was quietly considered, often revisited during periods of labor or reflection, allowing lessons to settle gradually into understanding. Social interactions reinforced principles learned from study, integrating theory with lived experience. The slow observation of human nature fostered empathy, caution, and measured judgment, teaching Lincoln to consider multiple perspectives before reaching conclusions. Repetition in both observation and reflection strengthened insights, embedding them into a coherent framework of thought. Even minor events, a disagreement in court, a barter in the store, or a neighborly exchange provided incremental lessons that influenced broader understanding. Over years, these repeated, quiet observations shaped a sophisticated awareness of character, motivation, and consequence. The steady accumulation of knowledge through patient observation reinforced Lincoln's deliberate, reflective approach to decision-making and leadership. Labor, in its many forms, reinforced the slow formation of ideas by linking reflection with physical rhythm. While splitting rails, walking to court, or performing clerical work, Lincoln's mind was free to contemplate principles, review arguments, or consider moral questions. The repetition and steady pacing of tasks created mental space for thought to mature, allowing ideas to develop gradually rather than abruptly. Physical fatigue focused attention, emphasizing clarity of thought and deliberate reasoning, as impulsive or hurried reflection was often counterproductive. Daily routines provided both structure and time for contemplation, integrating labor, observation, reflection into a continuous process of intellectual growth. The slow, deliberate nature of work mirrored the formation of ideas, reinforcing the value of patience, careful consideration, and incremental understanding. Even in periods of solitude or obscurity, the body's rhythm supported the mind's gradual development of principles and strategies. Repetition, reflection, and endurance became intertwined, shaping a mindset capable of sustained attention, deliberate judgment, and balanced reasoning. The accumulation of insights over time created a foundation for thought that was both deeply considered and resilient. Labor, therefore, was not only physical but also a medium through which ideas could be patiently nurtured and refined. Failure, delay, and modest achievements also contributed to the gradual formation of ideas. Unlike dramatic victories, most of Lincoln's early work and learning yielded slow or barely visible progress, requiring patience and perseverance. Errors in legal drafts, misunderstandings in social interactions, or setbacks in study offered quiet lessons in humility, careful thought, and reflection. Each small failure prompted reconsideration, adaptation, and further observation, reinforcing the incremental nature of understanding. Patience was cultivated naturally, as outcomes were rarely immediate and recognition was often delayed or absent. The steady, repetitive engagement with tasks, reflection on outcomes, and integration of lessons into daily life created a pattern of gradual intellectual and moral growth. Over time, these experiences produced discernment, foresight, and the capacity to anticipate consequences, all developed through quiet observation rather than dramatic instruction. The accumulation of minor successes corrected errors. Refined thought reinforced confidence and competence. Lincoln's ideas were forged through patient repetition, reflection on lived experience, and careful integration of study and observation. The slow, deliberate formation of understanding exemplified the profound effectiveness of measured, steady intellectual cultivation. Even personal reflection during periods of solitude contributed significantly to idea formation. Lincoln frequently spent hours walking, observing the landscape, or quietly thinking while performing routine tasks. These periods allowed him to revisit concepts, test principles against experience, and consider alternative approaches to challenges. Reflection was methodical and calm, not hurried or dramatic, enabling complex ideas to develop over time. The mind integrated observations from labor, social interactions, legal practice, and study, producing coherent, practical, and ethical insights. Each day added a small increment to understanding, reinforcing the patient accumulation of knowledge. Emotional restraint facilitated clear thinking, ensuring that reflection was guided by reason rather than immediate reaction. Through repeated contemplation, principles were internalized, tested against experience, and refined incrementally. This careful, deliberate mental process allowed Lincoln to build a nuanced understanding of law, human behavior, and morality. The slow formation of ideas through reflection exemplifies the quiet, methodical cultivation of intellect that defined his early years. Over the years, the cumulative effect of patient study, careful observation, reflection, modest labor shaped Lincoln's ability to think deeply and act deliberately. Ideas developed gradually, informed by repeated experience, sustained observation, and methodical reasoning. There were no sudden epiphanies. Instead, principles, judgments, and strategies matured quietly through continuous engagement with work, study, and life. Each incremental lesson, whether learned through reading, conversation, labor, or observation, contributed to a coherent framework of thought. Emotional restraint and patience reinforced this slow intellectual growth, ensuring that ideas were integrated thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Over time, the slow accumulation of knowledge, experience, reflection produced a temperament capable of careful analysis, ethical reasoning, and strategic planning. The quiet rhythm of daily life, structured by labor, study, and reflection, provided the ideal environment for this gradual formation of ideas. Incremental progress, repetition, and calm deliberation became the guiding forces of intellectual development. By embracing patience, observation, and reflection, Lincoln's mind matured steadily, prepared to meet the demands of leadership with wisdom, foresight, and measured judgment. Abandoned homesteads across the Midwest and Appalachia offer a quiet, contemplative glimpse into the lives of ordinary 19th century Americans, revealing routines, struggles, and the rhythms of daily existence long after families have departed. Walking among the remnants of wooden structures, stone foundations, and weathered barns, One can imagine the people who once inhabited these spaces moving through the cycles of planting, harvesting, and maintaining their property. The scattered tools, broken furniture, rusted implements left behind suggest the daily labor required to sustain life, where every task from tending animals to chopping firewood was performed with steady attention and repetitive effort. These sites, though empty of their former inhabitants, carry the subtle imprint of human presence, marked by the wear on doorways, the placement of hearths, and the paths carved between fields and outbuildings. Observation of these homesteads provides insight into the organization of domestic and agricultural spaces, illustrating how families structured their lives around necessity, efficiency, and seasonal rhythms. Even the smallest artifacts, such as a fragment of a cooking pot or a handmade nail, reveal careful thought, resourcefulness, and the slow accumulation of knowledge over time. The isolation of these homes, often miles from neighbors, highlights the self-sufficiency required, the quiet endurance of daily labor, and the reliance on routine for survival. Seasonal changes dictated the pace of life, from planting in spring to harvest in autumn, reinforcing the steady, predictable rhythm of work that dominated existence. Through careful observation, one can reconstruct not only the physical layout of these homesteads, but also the daily experiences, habits, and struggles of the families who live there. Each abandoned homestead tells a story of resilience, perseverance, and the subtle imprint of ordinary lives on the land. The layout of abandoned homesteads often reflects practical priorities, where structures were arranged to facilitate daily routines and minimize effort. Houses were typically positioned near water sources, barns, and tool sheds, allowing for efficient movement between essential tasks. Pots worn into the ground indicate the repeated steps taken by family members as they carried water. Fed animals were transported harvested crops. Hearths and cooking areas revealed the centrality of food preparation in daily life. The proximity of storage spaces illustrates the importance, preserving provisions for winter. Small, carefully built outbuildings demonstrate resourcefulness and adaptability, designed to shelter animals, store tools, or accommodate seasonal needs. Foundations and floor plans suggest a pragmatic approach to space, emphasizing functionality over comfort or aesthetics. Observing these structures reveals the rhythm of daily life, where every movement, task, and arrangement was informed by necessity and efficiency. The positioning of fences, wells, and gardens provides insight into labor patterns and social routines, reflecting both survival strategies and a quiet connection to the land. Even decay and deterioration tell a story, showing how time, weather, and human absence gradually reclaim spaces once carefully managed. Through the study of layout and remnants, these homesteads offer a window into the practical, measured life of 19th century rural families. Facts found in abandoned homesteads provide further insight into daily routines, technological adaptation, and material culture. Rusted farming implements, broken cooking utensils, and fragments of furniture speak to the repetitive labor, careful planning, resourcefulness necessary for survival. Each tool, whether a hoe, plow, or spinning wheel, represents a small lesson in skill, endurance, and gradual mastery, evidence of homemade repairs, repurposed materials, or ingenious adaptations illustrates the incremental accumulation of practical knowledge over time. Personal items, from handmade clothing to discarded household objects, offer glimpses into habits, preferences, and the daily experience of family members. Even the absence of certain items can be informative, suggesting priorities, economic limitations, or cultural norms. These artifacts allow observers to reconstruct the rhythm of life, where repetitive tasks, careful attention, and incremental improvement define daily existence. Seasonal patterns are evident in preserved seeds, crop storage facilities, and tool arrangements, emphasizing the influence of nature on human activity. Through the accumulation and careful study of material remnants, the quiet, measured existence of rural families can be understood in its full texture, revealing the persistence, patience, and resourcefulness required for life on the frontier. The isolation of Midwest and Appalachian homesteads underscores the self-sufficiency demanded by rural life. Families often lived miles from neighbors, relying on their own labor skills and planning for survival. Daily routines were structured around the repetitive cycle of tending animals, cultivating crops, and maintaining buildings with little external support. The quiet solitude allowed for reflection, observation, and careful planning, but also demanded emotional resilience, patience, and steady endurance. Seasonal change dictated every action from spring planting to autumn harvest, requiring attention to timing, weather, and environmental conditions. Long winters reinforced the need for preparation, stored provisions, resourceful adaptation to ensure survival during periods of scarcity. Children, too, contributed to labor, learning the rhythm of work and the importance of routine from an early age. Isolation did not preclude connection entirely, as occasional visits to neighboring farms or local gatherings provided opportunities for exchange, observation, and communal support. Even in solitude, families developed rich patterns of work, reflection, and learning, passing knowledge quietly from one generation to the next. The abandoned homesteads preserve the echoes of these routines, highlighting the persistence, patience, and self-reliance that define rural life. Archaeological investigation of these abandoned sites reveals layers of human activity and insight into daily routines long after families have departed. Excavation of wells, storage pits, and foundations allows researchers to reconstruct not only physical structures, but also patterns of labor, consumption, and social organization. Soil analysis, artifact distribution, and remnants of tools provide evidence of repetitive tasks, seasonal rhythms, and long-term adaptation to environmental conditions. Even subtle traces such as the wear on floorboards, marks on utensils, or orientation of fences illuminate the steady, careful work embedded in daily life. Archaeology reveals the incremental accumulation of knowledge, skills, and cultural practices that define survival in rural areas. Each discovery is a quiet testament to ordinary life, illustrating how effort, observation, and adaptation were woven into the fabric of daily existence. The presence of abandoned fields, garden plots, and animal enclosures provides evidence of seasonal planning and practical ingenuity. By combining physical evidence with historical records and oral histories, archaeologists can reconstruct a detailed picture of life, work, and social organization. The study of abandoned homesteads highlights not dramatic events but the slow, persistent rhythms of ordinary people's lives, emphasizing endurance, reflection, and the careful management of resources through archaeology. These quiet spaces continue to tell the stories of those who lived, labored, and observed, leaving subtle traces of their existence for modern reflection. Patterns of abandonment also reveal the fragility and impermanence of these lives, offering insights into economic pressures, migration, and environmental challenges. Families often left homesteads due to depleted soil, changing markets, illness, or opportunity elsewhere, leaving behind objects, buildings, and traces of daily life. The quiet disappearance of communities highlights the balance between human effort and external forces such as weather, disease, and economic shifts. Studying these departures allows for reflection on the patience, resilience, resourcefulness required to sustain life in rural America. Even in abandonment, remnants of organization, planning, and routine remain visible, illustrating how slow, consistent labor created order and stability over time. Observers can trace the pathways of movement, fields left fallow, and buildings gradually reclaimed by nature, while reflecting a subtle interplay between human intention and environmental constraints. The abandoned homesteads are thus not simply ruins, but repositories of knowledge about daily life, adaptation, and quiet endurance. They speak to the rhythm of ordinary life, where incremental work, observation, reflection determine both survival and legacy. Through careful study, these silent landscapes reveal the measured, persistent, and thoughtful character of the families who once inhabited them. The Midwest and Appalachian homesteads remain a testament to human patience, resilience, and the slow, deliberate accumulation of knowledge in everyday life. Even minor details in abandoned homesteads contribute to a fuller understanding of daily existence. In cultural practices, the arrangement of cooking areas, placement of tools, or types of stored seeds suggest routines, priorities, adaptation to seasonal challenges, fragments of clothing, handmade items, and personal effects indicate resourcefulness, skill development, and incremental learning within families. Subtle wear patterns in pathways or doorways reveal the repetition and rhythm of movement across property, reflecting habits formed over years of daily labor. Each object in space offers a window into the slow, methodical progression of knowledge, practice, and adaptation that characterized rural life. Seasonal planning, careful storage, and labor distribution are evident throughout, demonstrating the quiet foresight and endurance necessary for survival. Observation of abandoned sites encourages reflection on the rhythms of life, the integration of labor and learning, and the resilience required to meet daily challenges. Even in decay, these homesteads preserve the imprint of steady effort, patient observation, and the deliberate structuring of ordinary life. The accumulation of small details creates a coherent picture of persistent, incremental adaptation, where every task, object, and space contributed to the measured progress of family life. Abandoned homesteads remain living lessons in endurance, patience, and the quiet dignity of ordinary existence. What broken tools, wells, and foundations reveal about life on abandoned homesteads is both subtle and profound, offering insight into the rhythm, labor, and daily endurance of 19th century rural families. Each rusted axe, chipped hoe, or fractured plowshare tells of repetitive labor, steady effort, and the careful maintenance required to sustain crops, livestock, and the home. The pattern of wear on tools indicates frequency of use, preferred techniques, and the incremental mastery of practical skills over years of routine work. Wells, often lined with stone or timber, reveal careful planning, effort, and foresight, serving as the lifeline for drinking water, cooking, cleaning, and sustaining livestock through long seasons. Their presence speaks to the integration of labor, observation, and practical knowledge, as families had to understand soil, depth, and water availability to construct functional sources of life-sustaining resources. Foundations of homes and outbuildings indicate deliberate spatial planning, highlighting the organization of domestic and agricultural spaces for efficiency and ease of movement between tasks. Crumbling walls and collapsed beams, though signs of decay, reveal the craftsmanship, resource allocation, and labor invested in creating durable structures under the constraints of limited technology and material availability. Even the arrangement of these elements across a property illustrates seasonal patterns, daily routines, and the interconnectedness of work, observation, and survival. By studying these remnants, one can reconstruct the quiet, repetitive, and measured existence of families whose lives depended on careful attention, continuous labor, and persistent adaptation to the environment. Broken and weathered objects, foundations, and wells serve as quiet records of endurance, patience, and the slow accumulation of practical knowledge across generations. Tools, in particular, offer a tactile connection to the labor and skill embedded in daily routines. An old chipped hoe reveals countless hours of tilling soil, planting seeds, and managing weeds, demonstrating both physical endurance and careful technique. A fractured axe indicates repeated use in chopping firewood, felling trees, or maintaining fences, each swing a combination of force, rhythm, and accumulated skill. Rusted nails, worn hammers, and bent saws tell stories of construction, repair, and adaptation, showing how families maximize limited resources through careful maintenance and ingenuity. The placement of tools within the homestead reflects the sequence of daily work. The implements positioned near areas of frequent use, such as barns, gardens, or workspaces, illustrating the practical organization of labor. Even broken tools revealed problem solving as families repaired, repurposed, or adapted implements to meet ongoing needs. Subtle variations in work patterns highlight the incremental learning and refinement of technique over time. Observing these tools allows one to understand not only the physical effort, but also the mental attention, planning, and patience required to maintain a functioning homestead. Each tool embodies a quiet rhythm of repetitive labor, reflection, and adaptation, reinforcing the slow, steady progression of skill and survival. The accumulation of minor repairs, modifications, and replacements illustrates the continuous, patient engagement with daily challenges that define rural life. Wells as essential infrastructure illuminate the intersection of labor planning and environmental awareness. Constructing a well required careful observation of land, soil, and water tables, as well as sustained physical effort to dig and reinforce the shaft, timber lining, stone placement, and debris removal were performed with patient, repetitive effort, reflecting an understanding of material properties and long-term maintenance. Wells served multiple purposes, providing water for drinking, cooking, washing, and livestock, linking them directly to daily routines and seasonal cycles. Serving the depth, structure, and placement of wells provides insight into the planning, resource allocation, and foresight that sustains families through variable weather and changing conditions. Even abandoned wells tell stories of reliance on consistent effort, observation, and incremental problem solving, revealing the integration of physical labor with practical knowledge. Maintenance of wells, from cleaning to repair, demanded repeated attention, underscoring the slow, steady rhythm of daily life. The presence and condition of wells also hint at the resilience and endurance required to navigate periods of scarcity, drought, or environmental challenge. By studying wells, one gains a deeper appreciation for the careful coordination of labor knowledge and patience that rural families depended upon. Each well is a silent testimony to the quiet diligence, resourcefulness necessary for sustaining life over decades. Foundations, the most enduring elements of homesteads, reveal both spatial organization and long-term planning. The dimensions and orientation of foundations indicate functional priorities, with living spaces, storage areas, and workspaces arranged to maximize efficiency and daily accessibility. Stone footings, timber supports, and earthen floors illustrate practical craftsmanship adapted to available materials and environmental conditions. Even when partially collapsed or weathered, foundations convey the repetition and steady labor involved in construction, as each layer of stone or timber requires careful placement and consideration. Serving foundations alongside surrounding features such as fences, garden plots, and outbuildings allows reconstruction of daily movement patterns, illustrating how labor, chores, and routines were interwoven across property. The stability or deterioration of foundations also hints at the durability of human effort against the passage of time, emphasizing the enduring impact of incremental work and careful planning. Families had to anticipate seasonal challenges, weather extremes, and material limitations, integrating foresight into every aspect of construction. Foundations reflect both the physical and intellectual labor invested in creating a functional, organized environment for survival and continuity. Through careful examination, one can trace the quiet, patient accumulation of practical knowledge, endurance, and adaptation embedded in every aspect of homestead construction. These enduring structures stand as subtle reminders of resilience, methodical labor, and the slow, deliberate shaping of human life in rural America. Broken objects, wells, and foundations together form a narrative of repetition, adaptation, and persistence. Each element reflects the daily cycles of labor, reflection, and incremental problem solving that structured life on the homestead. Physical effort was intertwined with observation and planning as families adjusted techniques, repaired structures, and optimized routines to sustain both crops and domestic life. The slow accumulation of practical knowledge over years or decades is evident in every repair, modification, or reinforcement, illustrating how small, patient actions contributed to long-term survival. Seasonal demands dictated patterns of activity with the placement and use of tools, maintenance of wells, and adaptation of foundations, reflecting careful anticipation and foresight. Even abandoned and deteriorated, these artifacts offer insight into the measured, repetitive work and thoughtful adaptation required in daily life. Observers can reconstruct routines, priorities, and problem-solving approaches, revealing the quiet resilience, patience, and practical intelligence of families navigating rural life. Each worn tool, sunken foundation, and repaired well embodies the rhythm of work, reflection, and incremental learning that characterized homesteads across the Midwest and Appalachia. Through the study of these remnants, one gains an understanding of endurance, measured effort, and the subtle artistry of sustaining life within a demanding environment. Broken tools, wells, and foundations are, therefore, not merely remnants but enduring markers of persistence, reflection, and careful attention to the rhythms of ordinary life. Daily life on these homesteads can be partially reconstructed by tracing patterns left in broken and repaired artifacts. Chip tools suggest repeated handling, use, and repair, reflecting the physicality of daily labor alongside the intellectual consideration required for adaptation. Foundations show patterns of spatial organization, revealing how families structured their lives to balance efficiency, comfort, and survival. Wells illustrate careful planning and ongoing maintenance, essential for sustaining daily routines and seasonal needs. Combination of these elements highlights the repetition and rhythm of tasks that govern life, emphasizing endurance, patience, and deliberate effort. Even small anomalies, such as a shifted stone or a repaired plank, provide insight into problem-solving, foresight, and the incremental improvements made over years of experience. These remnants collectively reveal the interconnectedness of labor, observation, and planning, forming a holistic understanding of rural life. Observers can imagine the quiet rhythms of daily activity, the measured pace of work, and the attentive care invested in sustaining both family and land. Physical traces of labor, repair, and adaptation illustrate the slow, patient formation of knowledge, skill, and resilience embedded in ordinary routines. Through careful study, the silent stories of tools, wells, and foundations illuminate the enduring lessons of practical wisdom, perseverance, and thoughtful engagement with the environment. Artifacts, wells, and foundations also provide insight into family dynamics and community interaction. The distribution of tools may reflect roles, responsibilities assigned to different family members, the children learning skills through observation and repetition. Maintenance of wells and repair of structures often required cooperative effort, highlighting the importance of collaboration, shared knowledge, and interdependence within the family unit. Even subtle signs, such as wear patterns on pathways or tool usage, reveal the rhythm and sequencing of daily activities, demonstrating how families coordinated labor across space and time. Incremental adjustments to structures or implements illustrate both practical ingenuity and the quiet accumulation of experience passed from one generation to the next. Observing these remnants fosters an understanding of how family life, labor, and learning were intertwined, creating a cohesive and resilient household structure. Seasonal rhythms reflected in the placement and use of tools, the care of wells, and adaptations to foundations reinforced patterns of work and observation that structured family life. These quiet indicators highlight the interplay of labor, reflection, and incremental learning that characterize rural homesteads. Even in absence, the traces of labor, planning, and cooperation provide insight into the disciplined, patient, and interconnected routines of daily life. Broken tools, wells, and foundations thus reveal not only physical labor but also the subtle rhythms, social structures, and enduring knowledge of ordinary families. Why families left abandoned homesteads without leaving records is a question that reflects both the impermanence of rural life and the quiet pragmatism of 19th century American families. Many departures were gradual, dictated by economic necessity, environmental pressures, or the lure of opportunity elsewhere rather than dramatic events worthy of documentation. Families often move in search of more fertile land, better access to markets, or more favorable climates, leaving behind homes, tools, and belongings that could not be easily transported. Illness, loss, or the death of a family member could also necessitate relocation, creating a need for rapid adaptation that precluded formal record keeping. The absence of written documents does not imply carelessness, rather, it reflects the practical priorities of survival, labor, and daily management over archival preservation. Many homesteads were established by individuals or families with limited literacy or access to paper, further reducing the likelihood of records being created or maintained. Even when records existed, they were often lost, damaged, or deliberately left behind, as the focus was on immediate survival rather than future historical documentation. Seasonal pressures, harsh winters, and constant labor demanded attention to the present, leaving little energy for detailed account keeping. Oral tradition and memory often sufficed within the family unit, providing guidance, knowledge, and continuity without formal writing. Archaeological evidence, therefore, becomes essential for reconstructing the lives of these families, revealing daily routines, social organization, and the cumulative effort invested in survival and adaptation over generations. Environmental pressures played a significant role in prompting families to leave their homesteads, often without formal records. Soil depletion, flooding, drought, or harsh winters could make sustaining crops and livestock increasingly difficult, encouraging families to seek more productive land elsewhere. The cyclical nature of agriculture meant that failure in one season could have cascading effects, making relocation a practical necessity rather than an extraordinary decision. These moves were often undertaken quickly, dictated by immediate need, leaving little time for documentation or careful record keeping. Tools, livestock, and essential items were transported, while less portable objects, papers, or personal records were left behind or discarded. Families adapted to the unpredictability of their environment, prioritizing survival and continuity of labor over the preservation of historical evidence. Even minor environmental challenges compounded over years could prompt gradual abandonment, with each family member contributing to packing, planning, and execution in a quiet, methodical manner. The land itself, through its fertility, accessibility, and resource availability, shaped patterns of settlement, movement, and labor, leaving behind traces and foundations, wells, artifacts rather than written records. Observing these abandoned sites, one can infer the influence of environmental pressures on decision-making, routine, and the timing of relocation. These departures reflect both the resilience and adaptability of rural families, leaving physical clues of their presence while withholding written testimony. Economic factors also contributed to families leaving homesteads without records. Market fluctuations, changes in crop prices, or the burden of debt could make sustaining a farm financially unviable. Families often had to respond pragmatically, relocating to areas with better opportunities for trade, labor, or land acquisition. The need to act quickly in response to economic pressures left little room for formal documentation or detailed correspondence. Essential items such as tools, livestock, and portable goods were prioritized for transport, while papers, ledgers, or personal documents were often abandoned. Even in times of relative prosperity, limited resources and daily labor demands meant that record keeping was secondary to survival and maintenance of household function. The movement driven by economic necessity emphasizes the practical, incremental decision-making characteristic of rural life, where adaptation and flexibility were crucial. Evidence of these economic choices is embedded in the landscape, abandoned fields, Relocated structures into a remnant signal the measured adjustments made over time. By examining these physical traces, historians can reconstruct the reasoning patterns of labor, the decision-making processes that guided families in the absence of written records. Economic pressures intertwined with environmental and social factors, thus explain the practical rationale for leaving homes and the sparse documentation that accompanies them. Social factors, including family networks and community relationships, also influence departures without records. Extended families, neighbors, and friends provided informal support, guidance, and continuity that reduced the need for formal documentation. Moves were often coordinated within social networks, the knowledge transmitted orally rather than through letters or records. Life in rural communities was guided by practical necessity and shared experience, where instruction, advice, and customs were passed down through observation, participation, and storytelling. Social customs, expectations, and cooperation within the community facilitated relocation, allowing families to leave homesteads without the formality of written explanations. Additionally, events such as marriages, births, or deaths prompted natural shifts in residence, often managed quietly within the family network. The interconnectedness of families and neighbors provided continuity and stability, even in the absence of formal records or documentation. Oral memory served as a living record carrying practical knowledge, history, and cultural norms from one generation to the next. These patterns emphasize the reliance on human observation, repetition, and social learning in rural life. The absence of records, therefore, reflects not disorder but a reliance on enduring social structures and practical knowledge to maintain continuity across time and space. Health and mortality were additional factors influencing the lack of records. Illness, epidemics, and accidents often prompted urgent departures or sudden changes in household composition, leaving no opportunity for formal documentation. Care of the sick or dying required immediate attention, diverting labor resources and energy from the maintenance of written accounts. Families prioritized survival, tending to daily needs, labor, and sustenance rather than recording events for posterity. Even in smaller scale illnesses or injuries, the slow, repetitive rhythms of rural life demanded consistent attention, leaving little time for administrative tasks. The cumulative effect of disease, loss, and the unpredictability of health outcomes reinforced a focus on practical management rather than formal record keeping. These pressures were compounded by limited access to medical resources, the necessity of improvisation, and reliance on knowledge passed orally through generations. The human cost of survival in rural settings was absorbed quietly and pragmatically, leaving behind physical rather than written evidence of resilience and adaptation. Serving abandoned homesteads, one can see the imprint of these pressures in the arrangement of workspaces, remnants of tools and implements, and the careful, incremental structuring of daily routines. Mortality and health considerations thus contributed to departures without records, emphasizing the focus on practical, immediate survival. In addition, literacy and access to materials influenced whether records were kept or preserved. Many rural families had limited literacy, restricting the ability to create formal documents, letters, or accounts. Paper, ink, and writing implements were scarce or costly, prioritized for legal, transactional, or essential communication rather than personal documentation. Oral transmission of knowledge, instructions, and history was therefore the primary method for preserving information within families and communities. Even those who could write often focuses on practical notes such as ledgers or inventories, which were less likely to survive long-term due to their utilitarian use. The lack of formal records was not necessarily a sign of neglect but a reflection of the resources, priorities, and daily demands of rural life. Families relied on memory, observation, and repetition to retain essential knowledge, ensuring continuity without the permanence of written accounts. Abandoned homesteads, in turn, preserved the physical traces of these strategies well as foundations. tools and structures serve as enduring evidence of routine, skill, and persistence. The absence of written documentation invites careful observation of the material record, which holds detailed clues to the structure, rhythm, and labor of daily life. Literacy limitations combined with practical constraints shape the quiet, resilient strategies families employed to sustain life without formal records. Finally, the rapidity and unpredictability of relocation often prevented record keeping. Families frequently moved in response to immediate necessity, crop failure, market pressures, or environmental change requiring swift action rather than deliberate documentation. Packing essential items, organizing transport, and coordinating labor consumed time and energy, leaving little opportunity to maintain records or letters. Decisions were guided by practical knowledge, observation, and incremental planning rather than formal planning or bureaucratic documentation. Even gradual migration over months or years often resulted in abandoned possessions, fields, and homesteads which retained the imprint of labor and organization but lacked formal explanation. The landscape with its wells, foundations, and scattered tools becomes the primary record, quietly preserving evidence of daily routines, problem solving, and the persistence of ordinary families. Observers can reconstruct the sequence of activity, labor distribution, adaptation strategies through careful study, compensating for the absence of written documents. The patterns of abandonment reveal the interplay of practical necessity, environmental pressures, and social networks, illustrating the measured, patient, and deliberate approaches to survival. Families left no formal records because daily life, survival, and adaptation required attention to immediate, tangible realities rather than abstract documentation, leaving behind only the physical, enduring traces of their existence. In this way, the absence of records becomes a testament to the quiet pragmatism, resilience, and steady labor that characterize rural life. Archaeology serves as a gentle and deliberate means of reconstructing the ordinary lives of families who once inhabited abandoned homesteads, allowing us to trace patterns of labor, adaptation, and routine without the need for written records. Through careful excavation and observation, archaeologists can interpret wells, foundations, tools, and domestic debris to reveal the rhythm and structure of daily life. Every artifact, from a broken plow to a fragment of pottery, holds clues to the repetitive tasks, seasonal planning, and incremental problem solving that define existence on the frontier. The spatial arrangement of buildings, fences, and pathways provides insight into the organization of work, the movement of people and animals, and the prioritization of tasks necessary for survival. Even the simplest items, such as handmade nails or worn cooking implements, reflect patience, skill development, and the gradual accumulation of practical knowledge over years of effort. By examining these remnants with careful attention, archaeologists can reconstruct routines, workloads, and patterns of life, revealing the subtle interplay of labor, observation, and environmental adaptation. Seasonal cycles reflected in tool placement, field layout, and stored goods become visible through the careful analysis of material remains, illustrating the slow, deliberate structuring of time and activity in rural households. Archaeology thus functions as a quiet detective work, patiently piecing together evidence to reveal the daily experiences of people who lived, worked, and persisted in relative obscurity. Each excavation site becomes a narrative of endurance, reflection, and measured adaptation, offering insight into ordinary lives that left no written testimony. Through patient observation and interpretation, the material record speaks softly but clearly, demonstrating the cumulative impact of small, repetitive actions across generations. Careful study of foundations allows archaeologists to reconstruct the spatial organization of homesteads, illustrating the relationship between domestic life, agricultural labor, and storage. By mapping remaining walls, floors, and post holes, researchers can understand the layout of living quarters, barns, and outbuildings, revealing patterns of movement and workflow. These structures demonstrate how daily routines were structured around necessity, efficiency, and the seasonal demands of farming. The positioning of hearths, kitchens, and storage areas indicates the centrality of food preparation, preservation, and consumption in family life. Variations in foundation size and construction materials reflect both economic conditions and adaptation to local resources, showing how families adjusted their techniques to meet specific challenges. Even collapsed or weathered foundations provide clues about construction methods, maintenance routines, and the longevity of buildings under constant labor and environmental stress. By comparing multiple homesteads, archaeologists can identify common patterns, shared practices, and regional adaptations, offering a broader perspective on rural life. Foundations, therefore, act as silent indicators of routine, organization, and the steady rhythm of work in domestic management. Each stone and timber placement reflects deliberate thought, repeated effort, and the gradual accumulation of knowledge necessary for efficient and sustainable living. Through careful interpretation, foundations reveal the quiet persistence and structured routines of ordinary families. Tools and domestic artifacts form another layer of insight, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct the labor, skills, and daily habits of rural inhabitants. Rusted implements, chipped cooking utensils, and handmade household objects demonstrate repetitive use, careful maintenance, and adaptation to practical needs. Even discarded or abandoned items tell stories of adaptation, resourcefulness, and the prioritization of essential tasks over non-essential possessions. Observing these artifacts allows a reconstruction of the interplay between labor, reflection, and routine, showing how small, repetitive actions maintain both household and agricultural productivity. Archaeology, through patient study of tools and domestic remnants, reveals the layered, methodical, and quiet rhythm of life on the homestead. Each artifact, broken or whole, is a testament to the steady endurance and careful observation that sustained families over decades. Soil analysis and landscape features also provide insight into long-forgotten routines and adaptations. Patterns of soil compaction, crop residues, and garden layouts reveal how families managed cultivation, irrigation, and land use over time. The placement of fences, pathways, animal enclosures shows deliberate planning to optimize daily work, minimize effort, and maintain order. Even subtle depressions or mounds indicate former structures, storage pits, or activity areas, preserving the sequence and organization of labor long after the physical structures have decayed. Seasonal planning becomes visible through the careful arrangement of fields, tool storage, and domestic areas, demonstrating the integration of observation, repetition, and foresight in daily life. Archaeologists can trace patterns of reuse, repair, and adaptation, showing how families incrementally improve techniques, structures, and workflows to meet evolving needs. The quiet endurance embedded in the landscape reflects both physical labor and intellectual engagement, revealing the thoughtful structuring of routines, resources, and space. By studying these features in combination with artifacts and foundations, a comprehensive understanding of daily life emerges, demonstrating the patient accumulation of skill, knowledge, and resilience. Even absent written records, the material and environmental evidence allows a reconstruction of the rhythms, practices, and incremental strategies that sustain families across generations. Landscape analysis, therefore, becomes a tool for understanding the interplay of labor, observation, and adaptation in ordinary rural life. Abandoned wells and storage areas offer further clues to the timing, rhythm, and structure of daily labor. Construction and maintenance of wells required observation, repeated effort, and knowledge of environmental conditions, reflecting both practical skill and foresight. Storage pits, granaries, and cellars illustrate preparation for seasonal scarcity, demonstrating careful planning and repetition of preservation techniques. Analysis of these structures allows archaeologists to infer schedules of labor, food management, and resource allocation, revealing the deliberate pacing of daily and seasonal routines. Patterns of wear and repair indicate incremental problem solving and adaptation, showing how families responded to both immediate needs and long-term planning. Even empty or deteriorated wells and storage spaces carry evidence of human attention, rhythm, and practical intelligence, reflecting the quiet endurance of daily life. The interplay of labor, observation, and planning is preserved in these features, providing insight into the systematic, patient strategies employed to sustain life. Archaeology thus reconstructs not just physical spaces, but the invisible structures of routine, foresight, and measured effort that guided family life. By interpreting wells and storage areas alongside artifacts, foundations, and landscape patterns, a detailed picture emerges of ordinary life shaped by repetition, reflection, and resilience. Each feature speaks quietly of the patient observation, steady work, and incremental learning essential to survival on the frontier. The synthesis of all archaeological evidence, foundations, tools, domestic items, wells, and landscape features creates a coherent narrative of ordinary life. Each piece contributes to an understanding of routines, priorities, and incremental problem solving that define existence. Repetition, observation, and patience emerge as central themes, revealing how families structured their days, months, and seasons to maintain stability and continuity. Even in the absence of written documentation, the material record preserves a wealth of information about skill development, labor allocation, and social organization. Archaeologists act as careful interpreters, piecing together fragments of evidence to reconstruct the quiet, measured rhythms of daily life. Incremental improvements, repairs, and adaptations are recorded in tools, structures, and landscape, illustrating the gradual accumulation of knowledge and expertise over years and generations. The result is a portrait of life that is not dramatic or sensational, but profoundly human, rooted in endurance, observation, and thoughtful engagement with the environment. Through patient reconstruction, archaeology reveals the subtle textures of existence, showing how repetition, labor, and foresight sustained families in rural America. Each excavated homestead becomes a story of quiet perseverance, resilience, and the careful formation of practical wisdom, whispering across the decades to tell the tale of ordinary yet remarkable lives. By reading these silent traces, we gain insight into the structure, rhythm, and patient labor that define everyday survival and adaptation on the frontier. Plantation owners and wealthy farmers in the 19th century experienced a daily life that, while still structured and disciplined, contrasted sharply with the exhausting labor of ordinary farmers and laborers. Their mornings often began with a measured breakfast, accompanied by reading of newspapers, letters, or financial accounts, setting the pace for a day guided less by physical exertion and more by observation and decision-making. Overseers, foremen, and hired hands performed the demanding field work, tending crops, managing livestock, and maintaining buildings, allowing owners to focus on planning, management, and correspondence. Ledgers and financial records dominated much of the day, requiring careful attention to expenses, crop yields, debts, and market conditions, each number representing both opportunity and responsibility. Meal times were more deliberate, with extended lunches and occasional social visits, offering pauses that punctuated a life of structured but lighter physical labor. Even routine travel around the property, whether inspecting fields or overseeing construction, was often performed by horseback, carriage, or leisurely walking, emphasizing observation rather than toil. The comfort of their homes, including multiple rooms, refined furnishings, and climate-protected spaces, contrasted with the humble cabins of laborers, illustrating a life where physical labor was largely delegated. Social and cultural activities such as hosting visitors, attending church, or participating in local governance further structured the day, blending social responsibility with leisurely engagement. Despite the relative ease of physical labor, their days were still disciplined, requiring focus, judgment, and the careful balancing of resources, labor, and social expectations. In this way, the daily routine of plantation owners and wealthy farmers reflects a life governed by observation, planning, and management, offering a calm and structured existence distinct from the rhythm of ordinary laborers. The daily routines of wealthy farmers were closely tied to the management of their land, finances, and workforce. Mornings often began with reviewing reports from overseers, noting progress on crops, livestock, and repairs, and making decisions that would influence the productivity and profitability of the property. The use of ledgers and correspondence allowed for careful tracking of income, expenses, and obligations, requiring a disciplined, attentive approach to detail. Interactions with foremen and laborers were strategic, ensuring that work proceeded according to plan while maintaining control over schedules, priorities, and quality. Leisurely midday meals offered a break in routine, often accompanied by conversation, reading, or quiet reflection, emphasizing both comfort and observation. Afternoons were frequently spent inspecting fields, orchards, or pastures, assessing conditions, and providing direction to the workforce without engaging directly in physical labor. The home itself was a center of administration, with offices, storage for records, and spaces designed for both work and comfort, demonstrating how architectural organization reinforced daily routines. Even recreation such as horseback riding, social calls, or participation in local events was structured and measured, integrating observation, movement, and social presence into a predictable rhythm. Planning for seasonal cycles, crop rotation, and maintenance of buildings required foresight and careful consideration, ensuring continuity and stability across the year. The daily routine, therefore, was a blend of intellectual labor, measured observation, and delegated physical effort, providing a life of calm productivity in contrast to the repetitive toil of ordinary farmers. Plantation owners' routines also included the management of social hierarchies and labor organization, emphasizing both oversight and authority, supervising hired hands, tenant farmers, or enslaved laborers required careful attention to task allocation, discipline, and productivity, with communication and oversight forming a significant portion of the day. Correspondence with agents, merchants, and distant family members facilitated trade, planning, and decision-making, while financial records captured the successes and failures of agricultural ventures. While laborers worked in the fields, owners moved through the property, observing work patterns, evaluating crop conditions, and adjusting plans for planting, harvesting, and storage. Meals, both formal and informal, served as opportunities for discussion, negotiation, and reflection, allowing owners to integrate social, economic, and practical priorities. Even leisure time, such as reading, writing, or walking through gardens, was imbued with quiet observation and structured engagement, maintaining a rhythm of thoughtful presence and measured action. Seasonal cycles dictated inspection schedules, maintenance planning, and market preparation, connecting intellectual labor with the ongoing management of physical resources. The balance between oversight, correspondence, and personal engagement created a structured day that relied on careful observation, patience, and incremental decision-making. In this way, the lives of wealthy farmers and plantation owners were governed by patterns of thought, planning, and strategic delegation, rather than the continuous physical exertion characteristic of ordinary rural laborers. Their routines reflect a calm, deliberate approach to life where attention, foresight, and structured observation replaced direct toil. Correspondence and ledger management were central elements of daily life for the wealthier landowners, reflecting both economic responsibility and social engagement. Morning and afternoon hours were often dedicated to reviewing letters, writing instructions to overseers, or communicating with merchants about the sale of crops, livestock, and goods. Ledgers meticulously recorded income, expenditures, debts, and investments, requiring precision, patience, and sustained attention to detail. These activities, though not physically demanding, provided a steady rhythm to the day, emphasizing consistency, discipline, and methodical thought. Instructions to laborers, schedules for planting and harvesting, and oversight of repairs were all mediated through written communication, reinforcing the structured nature of daily routines. The timing of correspondence often coincided with observation tours of the property, allowing owners to confirm that written instructions align with actual conditions on the land. Social correspondence, invitations, and legal communications also form part of the daily rhythm, connecting intellectual labor with societal expectations and personal obligations. Meal times, brief walks, or quiet reflection punctuated these administrative activities, maintaining a balance between thought, observation, and gentle engagement with the environment. The repetitive nature of reviewing, recording, and planning created a steady, measured flow of activity, reinforcing a sense of control, foresight, and quiet productivity. Through this combination of management, observation, and correspondence, wealthy farmers maintained both their estates and their social position with calm precision. Even leisure and recreational activities were integrated into the structured life of wealthy landowners, offering calm engagement without physical exertion. Morning walks, horseback rides, or time spent in gardens and orchards provided both relaxation and opportunities for observation, inspection, and reflection. Visits from neighbors, merchants, or family members allowed for social engagement, discussion of trade, and gentle intellectual stimulation. Reading newspapers, letters, and books offered insight into broader events, economic trends, and cultural developments, connecting the rural household to the wider world. Meals were occasions for measured conversation, reflection, and enjoyment, providing rhythm and pause within the day. Seasonal events, local fairs, or religious services offered additional opportunities for structured social interaction, maintaining both visibility and participation in the community. Even leisure time was carefully measured and aligned with the demands of estate management, demonstrating the interplay of observation, engagement, and reflection in daily life. This balance between administration, observation, and measured leisure contributed to a sense of calm, purpose, and stability throughout the year. While physically less demanding than the labor of ordinary farmers, these routines required attention, patience, and thoughtful engagement with both people and property. In this way, the daily life of wealthy landowners exemplified structured calm, strategic oversight, and deliberate interaction, creating a rhythm distinct from the toil-driven lives of their laborers. The measured pace and careful organization of tasks, observation, and leisure define a quiet, deliberate lifestyle rooted in management, foresight, and observation. Contrast between the lives of wealthy landowners and ordinary farmers is further reflected in the delegation of labor and responsibilities. Owners relied on hired hands, overseers, and sometimes enslaved individuals to perform physically demanding tasks. From plowing fields to tending livestock, their role was one of observation, decision-making, and strategic management rather than direct physical effort. By delegating labor while maintaining oversight, they could focus on planning, correspondence, financial management, and social engagement. Daily schedules were organized around inspection tours, review of reports, and meetings with agents or foremen, ensuring that work proceeded efficiently and according to plan. The careful structuring of work, observation, reflection allowed landowners to exert influence and maintain control over large areas and multiple activities. Seasonal variations influenced both delegated labor and administrative focus, with planting and harvesting demanding coordination and supervision, while slower periods allowed for reflection, repair planning, and strategic correspondence. Even in the absence of physical toil, the day was filled with structured tasks, measured decisions, and thoughtful observation, maintaining a rhythm of steady engagement and responsibility. This delegation created a life of calm productivity, emphasizing planning, foresight, and incremental management rather than the constant physical exertion of ordinary families. The routines of wealthy farmers and plantation owners thus illustrate a life for mental labor. Strategic oversight and measured social engagement form the central rhythm of daily existence. Ledgers, overseers, correspondents, and long meals form the backbone of the daily routines of plantation owners and wealthy farmers, shaping their lives with a steady rhythm that combine observation, management, and measured social engagement. Mornings often began with review of ledgers, where every entry, whether recording expenses, crop yields, or debts, required careful attention, precision, and reflection. These records were not only financial documents but also maps of labor, productivity, and seasonal cycles, connecting abstract numbers to the tangible realities of fields, livestock, and household management. Overseers played a crucial role in translating instructions from the owner into action, supervising laborers, monitoring progress, and ensuring that planting, harvesting, and maintenance proceeded according to plan. Communication with overseers required both clarity and patience, as owners relied on reports, observations, and occasional inspection to adjust strategies or provide guidance. Correspondence extended beyond the property, connecting landowners to merchants, neighbors, distant family, and local officials, forming a network of information, trade, and social interaction that influenced decisions and routines. Midday meals were long, unhurried affairs, offering time for discussion, reflection, and planning, as well as a break from administrative work. Combination of ledger review, oversight of labor-written correspondence, and extended meals created a measured cadence to the day, where attention and observation replaced physical toil. Even during moments of leisure, the mind remained engaged with tasks, planning, and reflection, maintaining continuity between observation, decision-making, and social responsibilities. These elements together illustrate a life structured around thoughtful management, careful oversight, and deliberate pacing, providing calm productivity in contrast to the continuous physical labor of ordinary farmers. Ledgers, meticulously maintained, allowed owners to track the productivity and efficiency of their land and labor force, offering insight into both economic and practical priorities. Each page recorded crop yields, sales, expenses, and debts, connecting abstract numbers to the concrete realities of the property. Observing patterns in these records enabled owners to plan future planting, manage seasonal workloads, and anticipate market demands with careful foresight. The rhythm of ledger review, combined with periodic correspondence and inspection, established a steady, contemplative pace to daily life. Overseers translated these plans into action, managing field operations, livestock, and laborers with skill and patience, serving as intermediaries between the owner's directives and the practical realities of the farm. Written instructions and regular reports allowed for continuous monitoring and adjustment, ensuring that both labor and resources were used efficiently. Long meals punctuated these periods of mental and administrative work, offering quiet reflection, discussion, and the gentle reinforcement of social and familial connections. Even social correspondence or meetings with neighboring landowners followed a measured schedule, blending observation, planning, and communication into a seamless rhythm. By integrating ledgers, correspondence, and oversight into daily life, wealthy farmers maintained a calm, controlled environment where structured routines minimized uncertainty and maximized both productivity and comfort. Combination of administrative labor, observation, and measured engagement with others defined a life of quiet diligence and steady attention to detail. Overseers were pivotal in maintaining the balance between observation and action, ensuring that laborers followed instructions while respecting the subtle rhythms of farm work. Their reports, often delivered in person or through written notes, provided insight into the progress of planting, harvesting, maintenance, and livestock care. Owners relied on these accounts to make decisions, adjust schedules, and plan future actions, forming a continuous loop of observation, instruction, and evaluation. This system allowed owners to remain physically removed from the exhausting labor of fields and barns, yet intimately connected to the productivity and well-being of the property. Communication with overseers required patience, clarity, and consistency, as miscommunication could lead to inefficiencies or missed opportunities in crop management. Regular site visits reinforced the instructions and allowed owners to confirm firsthand the condition of the land, buildings, and animals, integrating observation with practical decision-making. The steady management of labor through overseers created a rhythm that balanced mental engagement with indirect oversight, providing structure without direct physical exertion. These routines were intertwined with ledger review, correspondence, and planning, establishing a comprehensive pattern of observation, reflection, and quiet management. Even minor adjustments in labor deployment, maintenance scheduling, or resource allocation were made with care, reflecting both foresight and attentiveness. In this way, the relationship between owner and overseer shaped a measured, contemplative approach to the daily administration of wealth and labor. Correspondence was another central element of daily routine, connecting landowners to the wider world and influencing both practical and social decisions. Letters from merchants, agents, and neighbors provided information about crop prices, market conditions, and social events, while outgoing correspondence conveyed instructions, agreements, or personal updates. This exchange required careful attention, reflection, and methodical composition, reinforcing a calm, deliberate rhythm to the day. By managing correspondence alongside ledger review and oversight of labor, owners maintain both control and awareness of their property, workers, and social networks. Even the timing of letter writing was deliberate, often aligned with meals or quieter periods of observation, integrating the intellectual and social aspects of life into a structured schedule. Communication also served to reinforce social status, relationships, and obligations, providing a subtle form of engagement with community and family while preserving a measured pace. Viewing responses, adjusting instructions, and interpreting reports required mental discipline, attention to detail, and patient consideration, forming a continuous loop of information, decision-making, and reflection. This calm management of communication complemented the physical organization of labor and resources, forming a cohesive, structured approach to life on the estate. Through correspondence, owners could project oversight, maintain social ties, and reinforce control without engaging in direct labor, exemplifying a life of quiet responsibility and observation. The careful balance of reading, writing, and interpreting messages created a rhythm that emphasized thoughtfulness, planning, and measured interaction. Long meals provided both sustenance and structured pauses in the rhythm of the day, allowing owners to reflect, plan, and socialize without haste. Breakfasts, lunches, and dinners were leisurely, often featuring multiple courses, conversation, and periods of quiet reflection. These pauses reinforced the calm, deliberate pace of life, separating periods of administrative, observational, and managerial labor from the unhurried enjoyment of food and social interaction. Guests, family members, or neighbors might join, blending social and intellectual engagement with nourishment, reinforcing connections and relationships in a measured way. Meals also offered opportunities to review reports, discuss instructions with overseers, or consider financial and agricultural decisions, integrating sustenance with observation and planning. The rhythm of daily life was thus punctuated by these pauses, creating a predictable structure that balanced work, oversight, and leisure. Even minor details such as the timing, order, and setting of meals contributed to the organization and calm of the day, offering continuity and stability. Through long, unhurried meals, landowners could maintain focus, reflection, and social presence, reinforcing a measured, thoughtful approach to life. These structured pauses complemented ledger work, correspondence, and oversight, weaving together physical nourishment, mental engagement, and social interaction. In combination, these elements illustrate the quiet, deliberate rhythm that defined the daily lives of wealthy farmers and plantation owners. offering contrast to the unrelenting physical labor of ordinary rural families. The distance from physical labor in the lives of wealthy landowners allowed them to focus on observation, planning, and strategic engagement with both property and people, while field work, maintenance, and routine chores were delegated to laborers, overseers, or tenants. Owners maintained oversight and control through observation, reports, and correspondence. This separation did not mean idleness, rather, it structured the day around mental engagement, careful reflection, and deliberate pacing. Tasks such as reviewing ledgers, issuing instructions, inspecting property, and managing correspondence formed a steady rhythm, balancing administrative responsibility with moments of observation and quiet engagement. Leisurely meals, social visits, and reading punctuated these periods, reinforcing both calm and structure while maintaining attention to ongoing responsibilities. Contrast between mental and physical labor highlights the role of observation, foresight, and patient management is central to the rhythm of life for wealthy farmers. Seasonal planning, market preparation, and household oversight required sustained attention and consistent reflection, demanding a different kind of endurance than physical toil. Even periods of quiet reflection contributed to the maintenance of property labor efficiency and social standing, demonstrating that calm oversight was itself a form of labor. The structured routines of observation, ledger review, correspondence, and measured engagement created a balanced, deliberate life emphasizing continuity, foresight, and measured control. In this way, wealthy landowners experienced a life of calm productivity where careful attention, structured planning, and measured social and administrative engagement replaced the repetitive physical labor of ordinary farmers. The distance from physical labor in the lives of 19th century plantation owners and wealthy farmers created a rhythm of life that was both structured and contemplative, emphasizing observation, planning, and quiet authority rather than direct exertion. While laborers and field hands spent long hours tilling soil, tending crops, and managing animals, landowners remained physically removed, moving through the property to inspect, direct, evaluate rather than engage in the toil itself. This separation allowed them to focus on mental work, such as reviewing ledgers, corresponding with merchants or family, and strategizing for upcoming seasons or market opportunities. Oversight of the workforce required attentive observation, careful instruction, and patience, as even small errors in direction or miscommunication could affect productivity or efficiency. The physical distance also enabled landowners to engage in leisurely, reflective activities, such as walking through gardens, observing livestock, or reading, which, while calm, contributed to the careful management of the estate. Daily routines were punctuated by correspondence, meetings with overseers, and leisurely meals, all creating a steady, measured flow of activity that balanced administrative work with reflection and social presence. This removal from manual labor reinforced a lifestyle where authority, foresight, and structured observation replaced exhaustion, creating a distinct rhythm that emphasized planning and continuity. Even recreational activities such as riding horses, attending local events, or hosting guests were conducted in ways that maintained a controlled pace and observation-based engagement. The distance from physical labor did not indicate idleness, but rather a deliberate structuring of the day around intellectual, social, and managerial responsibilities. Through this separation, wealthy landowners maintained control over property, labor, and social position, exemplifying a life of calm productivity and measured engagement with both the environment and community. Being removed from the physical demands of farm work allowed plantation owners to devote significant energy to the management of resources and planning for the long-term sustainability. Their estates, while laborers managed repetitive tasks and endured the physical exhaustion of field work, owners could analyze reports, track expenditures, and make strategic decisions regarding planting, harvesting, and distribution. This mental engagement required focus, patience, and attention to detail, forming the backbone of daily life for those in positions of wealth and authority. Physical distance also meant that the rhythm of the day could be organized around observation rather than immediate response to labor challenges, allowing for a calm, contemplative pacing. Supervising overseers, evaluating the progress of crops, and ensuring the maintenance of buildings and fences all relied on attentive monitoring rather than direct manual labor, fostering a sense of measured control. The ability to step back from repetitive work enabled owners to notice patterns, identify potential improvements, and implement long-term strategies without being consumed by the immediate physical demands of the land. Social and administrative tasks such as managing correspondence, reading legal documents, and hosting visitors further occupied time while reinforcing the structured pace of life. Even periods of leisure, including quiet walks or reading, serve dual purposes: rest and continued observation of the property and its operations. This separation from physical labor emphasized thoughtful presence, measured decision-making, and continuous engagement with the broader environment and social structures. By remaining distant from toil, landowners maintained a steady rhythm of management, reflection, and observation that defined their daily experience in contrast to the relentless labor of ordinary farmers. Distance from labor also allowed wealthy farmers to establish routines grounded in observation, reflection, and strategic oversight rather than the immediacy of physical exertion. Their days were organized around inspecting fields, consulting with overseers, reviewing ledgers, and attending to correspondence, forming a cycle of calm, deliberate activity. Physical removal from demanding work also reinforced a sense of control and perspective, as owners could assess conditions across their property without being immersed in the repetitive tasks themselves. By moving through the estate at a measured pace, they could notice subtle changes in crops, animals, and infrastructure, using observation to inform decisions rather than responding reactively to immediate labor pressures. The separation provided time for planning seasonal activities, coordinating labor schedules, and managing social obligations, ensuring that all aspects of life were attended to in a deliberate manner. This structured distance created opportunities for reflection, learning, and incremental improvement, which were often impossible for those consumed by the constant cycle of field work and household chores. Even during moments of leisure or informal engagement with the community, attention remained focused on maintaining the rhythm and efficiency of the estate. Distance from physical labor also allowed for the development of cultural and intellectual pursuits, such as reading, discussion, and strategic planning, further enriching daily routines. The balance of oversight, planning, and reflective observation defined a measured, enduring rhythm of life distinct from the strenuous, repetitive labor of ordinary families. In this way, physical distance was not merely a luxury but an essential component of structured calm, management, and deliberate engagement with both people and land. The separation from direct labor also influenced the social and cultural dimensions of life. For wealthy landowners, with physical exertion delegated to laborers and overseers, time could be devoted to social rituals, correspondence, and community participation, creating a rhythm that balanced observation, reflection, and interpersonal engagement. Daily activities often included measured conversation, strategic decision-making, and attendance at local gatherings, all conducted in a calm, deliberate manner. Meals were extended and unhurried, providing both nourishment and an opportunity for quiet reflection or discussion with family and guests. Even recreational pursuits such as riding, walking, or gardening were integrated into daily routines as forms of calm observation, providing both rest and insight into the property and its resources. This distance from labor also allowed for intellectual engagement, including reading, writing, and planning for future seasons or economic decisions, emphasizing patience and foresight as central to daily life. By delegating physical work, landowners maintained the ability to structure their day with consistency and calm, blending oversight, reflection, and social presence. The rhythm created by this separation reinforced the measured, steady nature of life, allowing for continuity, stability, and deliberate engagement across a range of responsibilities. In this way, distance from physical labor was not only practical but also shaped the intellectual, social, and reflective dimensions of daily experience. The separation underscored the contrast between the physical toil of ordinary farmers and the structured, calm routines of those with wealth and authority. Finally, the distance from physical labor reinforced the long-term perspective that characterized the lives of wealthy farmers and plantation owners. With daily work delegated, attention could be devoted to planning, foresight, and the gradual accumulation of knowledge and control over resources. Seasonal rhythms were observed, with time allocated for inspection, adjustment, and reflection, ensuring that the estate remained productive and sustainable across years. This approach required patience, careful observation, and incremental decision-making, emphasizing measured engagement rather than reactive effort. Delegated labor created the conditions for structured oversight, where the rhythm of the day was dictated by observation, reflection, and planning, rather than the unpredictability of immediate physical demands. Even moments of rest or leisure were intertwined with observation and quiet contemplation, maintaining awareness of both property and workforce. Correspondence, financial management, and strategic planning were interwoven with social obligations, meals, and measured interaction, creating a steady, harmonious rhythm to daily life. The deliberate separation from labor enabled landowners to maintain control, foresight, and continuity, emphasizing mental engagement and structured reflection as central to existence. In this way, physical distance from toil was integral to the calm, ordered, and steady pattern that defined their daily experience. Through observation, delegation, and reflection, wealthy landowners cultivated a life of measured activity, enduring oversight, and quiet productivity that contrasted sharply with the relentless labor of ordinary rural families. Power expressed through land ownership and control of time was central to the lives of 19th-century wealthy farmers and plantation owners, shaping not only their daily routines but also their social influence and sense of authority. The possession of extensive land provided both economic security and the ability to dictate the labor and activities of those who worked under them, creating a rhythm of life guided by oversight rather than physical exertion. Time itself became a resource carefully allocated between observation, planning, correspondence, social obligations, and leisure, allowing owners to structure their days in a deliberate and measured manner. By delegating the physical work of planting, harvesting, and maintenance to laborers and overseers, they maintained a degree of freedom to observe, strategize, and reflect on long-term goals. Meals, correspondence, and inspections were spaced throughout the day to create a steady cadence, reinforcing the control that ownership granted over both people and activities. Careful management of time also allowed for participation in community affairs, social visits, and cultural pursuits, extending influence beyond the estate while maintaining a calm, structured life. Even small decisions such as scheduling maintenance or supervising seasonal labor reflected the power inherent in both property and the organization of daily routines. Land ownership provided a buffer from the unpredictable demands of physical labor, creating a predictable rhythm where attention, oversight, and strategic engagement defined the day. The ability to direct labor and resources according to planned schedules underscored both authority and calm, giving owners a measured sense of control over their surroundings. Through the interplay of land, labor, and time, the lives of wealthy farmers were structured around deliberate observation, incremental planning, and the quiet exercise of power, illustrating how property shaped both routine and influence. The expression of power through land and control of time extended to the social and cultural dimensions of daily life, reinforcing status and authority in subtle ways. Ownership of large estates allowed for leisurely walks through fields and gardens, quiet observation of livestock, and measured interaction with laborers and overseers. all reinforcing a presence that was both commanding and calm. Time could be devoted to the maintenance of personal records, letters, and financial accounts, demonstrating meticulous attention to detail and thoughtful management of resources. Social engagements, from hosting guests to attending local gatherings, were integrated into daily routines, reinforcing both influence and social status while preserving the structured flow of the day. Meals were long and unhurried, offering opportunities for discussion, planning, and quiet reflection, integrating nourishment with strategic thought. Delegation of labor allowed for observation without exertion, creating a rhythm where oversight, reflection, and social engagement were intertwined seamlessly. Seasonal cycles influenced the pacing of activities, with planting, harvesting, and preparation periods requiring focused observation and direction, while slower periods allowed for reflection and planning. Even small routines, such as reviewing correspondence or inspecting buildings, carried a weight of authority, demonstrating the careful use of time as a resource linked to power. By managing both people and schedules, wealthy landowners cultivated an environment of calm control, reinforcing authority through structure rather than force. In this way, combination of land ownership and deliberate time management created a life of measured influence and quiet, consistent power. Land ownership also shaped the perception and exercise of authority over labor and resources, creating a daily rhythm grounded in observation and decision-making rather than physical effort. Overseers and laborers executed the practical work of the estate, following instructions that reflected both strategy and accumulated experience. Owners moved through the property to observe and assess, making adjustments as needed to ensure efficiency, productivity, and compliance with long-term plans. Control over time allowed for deliberate pacing of inspection tours, correspondence, and meals, reinforcing the structured, calm nature of the day. Even leisure reading or personal reflection were integrated into this rhythm, contributing to thoughtful oversight and maintenance of influence. The ability to direct work, allocate resources, and structure routines reflected both economic power and social authority, establishing a pattern of life defined by deliberate action and observation. Daily decisions, from financial management to scheduling labor, were framed by the broader context of property and responsibility, emphasizing foresight and patience as essential qualities. Land and time together provided a framework in which authority was exercised quietly, steadily, without the pressures of immediate physical toil. By structuring life around observation, delegation, and reflection, wealthy landowners demonstrated how power could be expressed through calm control rather than constant activity. The steady rhythms of daily life, shaped by ownership and time, reinforced a sense of security, continuity, and deliberate influence over both property and people. Control over time also allowed landowners to engage in extended planning, cultural pursuits, and intellectual reflection, further reinforcing the subtle exercise of power. With physical labor delegated, time could be dedicated to reviewing ledgers, analyzing correspondence, and strategizing for future planting or financial decisions, creating a calm but purposeful daily pattern. Social interactions, both within the household and in the broader community, were scheduled and measured, allowing owners to maintain influence without disruption or haste. Leisure activities, including walking through gardens, observing crops, or spending quiet moments in study, integrated reflection with observation, reinforcing thoughtful oversight. The management of laborers, overseers, and tenants depended on careful timing, clear instructions, and patient observation, creating a structured environment where control was exercised methodically. Even moments of rest were shaped by an awareness of responsibility, blending calm reflection with attention to the estate and its people. Seasonal demands influenced the pacing of activities, but the deliberate allocation of time ensured that tasks were approached with foresight and efficiency. Through the careful control of time, owners could maintain both productivity and authority, sustaining a rhythm of life defined by measured engagement, rather than reaction to immediate pressures. This integration of property, observation, and time created a lifestyle where calm oversight, strategic planning, and subtle power were interwoven seamlessly. In this way, the expression of authority through land ownership and the management of time shaped a life of quiet influence, structured reflection, and deliberate action. Finally, combination of land ownership and control over time reinforced a sense of continuity and stability in the lives of wealthy farmers and plantation owners. By delegating physical labor and managing schedules, owners maintained oversight of both immediate operations and long-term planning, preserving the productivity and legacy of their estates. Meals, correspondence, inspections, and leisure were woven together into a calm rhythm, allowing attention, observation, and reflection to shape each day. The authority inherent in land ownership extended beyond the economy, influencing social, cultural, and intellectual life, and providing a foundation for structured routines and deliberate decision-making. Even the smallest elements of daily life, from overseeing repairs to scheduling meetings, infused with an awareness of responsibility and influence, creating a measured and steady pattern. This rhythm allowed owners to anticipate challenges, respond with foresight, and maintain control over both labor and resources, emphasizing the quiet exercise of power. Leisure and intellectual pursuits were integrated into daily schedules, reinforcing the reflective and contemplative nature of the day while sustaining authority. Seasonal and cyclical demands were met through careful observation, planning, and coordination, ensuring continuity and stability across months and years. Through the interplay of land, labor, and time, wealthy landowners shaped a life that balanced oversight, reflection, and calm productivity. The deliberate use of land and time as instruments of power created a lifestyle defined by quiet influence, structured engagement, and enduring authority over both people and property. As the day draws to a close on a 19th century American farm and on the estates of wealthy landowners, we are reminded of the gentle rhythm that governed every life, however different the experiences. For ordinary farmers, exhaustion followed the repetition of labor, the rise and fall of the sun dictating every task, while the calm oversight of wealthy landowners provided structure, authority, and reflection without the harshness of physical toil. Yet in both cases, life was measured, deliberate, and intimately tied to the land and the seasons. With each action, whether plowing a field, reviewing a ledger, or tending correspondence, contributing to the quiet continuity of daily existence. The cycle of work and rest, observation and action, reflection and engagement, created a comforting predictability, one that, while far from the conveniences of modern life, offered a framework of order and purpose. As night falls, imagine the farmhouses and estates growing quiet, with laborers returning home to simple meals and rest, while overseers and owners take stock of the day's accomplishments, preparing for the next. The land itself seems to exhale after a day of toil, fields resting beneath the moonlight, barns silent, and livestock settled for the night. In these moments, the intensity of work and the subtle rhythms of power merge into a shared human experience, a connection across social divides bound by land, labor, and time. The meticulous care of ledgers, the steady oversight of overseers, and the quiet reflection in long, unhurried meals all blend into a tapestry of life that, while distant from our modern pace, resonates with a calm, enduring presence. Consider the patience required to navigate seasons, to observe and guide rather than act without thought, to balance the demands of labor, social obligations, and personal reflection. Life in the 19th century demanded resilience, whether through physical exertion or the quiet endurance of oversight and responsibility. Every moment planting, harvesting, inspecting, recording, or corresponding was part of a measured pattern, each step connected to the rhythms of the earth and the cycles of the community. And though challenges were constant, from unpredictable weather to the limitations of medical care, a steady, patient approach offered a form of stability, a gentle assurance that life, despite its hardships, continued with rhythm and purpose. As you imagine these landscapes, fields stretching into the horizon, homesteads bathed in the soft glow of twilight, and grand estates maintained through quiet diligence, you can feel the cadence of a slower, more deliberate era. The lives of ordinary farmers, Abraham Lincoln in his early years, and the overseers and owners of large estates each illustrate different facets of existence, yet all share a common thread: the interplay of time, labor, and observation. This interweaving of effort, reflection, and structure provides a sense of comfort, a reminder that even in times far removed from our own, life followed a rhythm, and human endurance, patience, and careful attention shaped every day. As your mind begins to drift, imagine the quiet of the night settling over the land, the gentle rustle of leaves, the faint scent of soil and crops resting under moonlight, and the calm presence of the people who lived and worked there. Every repetitive task, every careful record, every moment of observation contributed to the continuity of life, creating a quiet harmony between human effort and the natural world. Let the image of these farms and estates, their routines and rhythms lull you toward rest, as the past blends softly with the present, and the steady pulse of human life across centuries becomes a gentle lullaby. Tonight, as the land rests, so too can your mind, carried by the measured cadence of days long past, into calmness, reflection, and sleep.